Chapter 309. Taoist Wolf doesn't know why Dragon King has such a reaction. He looks blankly at the clay statue like Yunzi beside him and then at Li Yunxin. Then he blinks and asks carefully, "What is Dragon King talking about?" Li Yunxin reaches out and pats the cold stone bricks of the city wall. "I'm talking about Taoist Jackal and the person behind him." He pauses and continues, "They seem to be smart people." "That's great." Or, "Forget it. Let's go to sleep. They won't come." His interest stops abruptly. He turns around and jumps off the city wall. This Taoist wolf doesn't know about Yang Jianzi, nor does he know that the backer of Taoist Jackal in the Hongling is his palace master. But Li Yunxin knows. He not only knows that Yang Jianzi has the Freemasonry behind him. He makes a mess in the R-city tonight, so the Freemasonry should know that he is here. However, Taoist Jackal and Yang Jianzi don't take advantage of the chaos to attack him, which means that they are smart. The Freemasonry doesn't intervene when Taoist Jackal and Yang Jianzi make such a choice. It means that after the battle in Dongting, those guys have restrained themselves. Both Qin Lichuan and Fu Lichuan are arrogant and have the momentum of, "I'm the best in the world." But now they seem to be hurt by Li Yunxin and have learned to be cautious. It's really wonderful. But there is one more thing Li Yunxin has to figure out. Wang Bojian of Munanju said that the Freemasonry wants the earth and stones of the Hongling, and they are very important. Why does the Freemasonry want these things? So Li Yunxin sits on the city wall and reads the translucent jade slip all night, trying to find some clues. There are many things hidden in the translucent jade slip. What he could see at the moment were mostly cultivation methods and techniques, as well as some secrets that cultivators should or shouldn't know. But there are still some things he can't see at the moment. When he first saw the shape of the translucent jade slip, he realized that it should be quite common in his previous world but should not appear in this world. This thing should be a product of technology. However, he soon discovered that activating the jade slip didn't require electricity, but demonic power. As his cultivation became more profound and he studied the jade slip more, he realized that it had actually been completely modified by the art saint. For example, it could only be activated with demonic power. The jade slip also used the spells of this world to set up a restriction. Without reaching a certain realm, many things couldn't be seen. The art saint combined techniques and spells on this small jade scroll. This was exactly the same as when Li Yunxin first saw the childish handwriting of Wu Song beating Hello Kitty. Extremely arrogant, wantonly showing off his strength and skills. But this was not what surprised Li Yunxin the most. What astonished him was the jade slip itself. The jade slip itself had not been modified by the art saint. The reason why he felt that it was something common in his world was because he wasn't sure. Because the technology of this thing might be a little more advanced than in his previous world. This made him even more puzzled. What was the origin of the art saint? Putting these things aside for the time being, his harvest from reading the translucent jade slip for the whole night was almost nothing. The art saint left a lot of his own cultivation experience in the jade slip, as well as a lot of complicated information. But the information didn't seem to be specially selected. It seemed like it was found from somewhere and stuffed in after little identification. It didn't require accuracy but comprehensive information. Therefore, after reading for the whole night, Li Yunxin knew where in the world there were rare treasures that could be used to refine magic tools or Taoist robes. He also knew what wood, what metal, and what stone were best to use to build magic arrays. Some he knew before and some he only knew after reading. But he didn't find any mention of the Red Ridge in the country of Yu. If the soil and stones in the Red Ridge were really important for refining some treasures, then it had been mined for thousands of years. How could there be no record of it? He decided to take a look for himself. Let's see what mysteries were there. After the sun rose above the horizon, Li Yunxin went down the city wall, leaving only the wolf Taoist on top. This was because before he went down the city wall, he saw people gradually appearing on the streets, their faces full of anger and resentment. The survivors in the city took shelter from the rain for a night and slowly recovered their strength in the morning. Moreover, there were officials on the streets. The original constables and arrestor Zhao of Rong City were killed in the bloody battle with the demons last night. The officials on the streets were most likely the former constables' helpers. Now they wore official uniforms to appease the people. Li Yunxin watched for a while at the top of the city wall and realized that these people were notifying something. First, they gathered the survivors on the streets and then led them to a certain place. He was about to go to Namuju again, so he simply went to the streets. But before he went out on the streets, he used a transformation technique to turn his brocade robe into hemp clothes, swaying as he draped them over his body. He looked like an immortal, but he didn't attract attention. Like this, he walked towards Namuju while looking at the crowd on the streets. So he knew that the yamen of Rong City had begun to function. More than 10 demons in the city were killed by the people, and the wolf Taoist also disappeared. The magistrate of the yamen was frightened and didn't dare to make any big movements for fear of revenge. But when the sun was about to rise and the rain stopped, he realized that there were no demons left in the city, and the people in the city could be used. The anger and resentment that had been suppressed for a long time burst out. After all, the magistrate of Rong City was an official sent by the imperial court of the state of Yu and had a jade belt and seal. He usually didn't dare to interfere with the affairs of Rong City, but how could he not have resentment? Looking at the current situation and the group of officials led by Arrestor Zhou had already gone out on the streets, he began to think. So he sat in the yamen and issued documents to rectify the affairs of the city. But he didn't expect that once he did, disaster would arise. The big and small matters of Rong City had long been controlled by the Pingyuan Monastery, and the yamen had been unused for a long time and had long been dilapidated. In this world, there was a custom called, officials don't repair the yamen. Because of this, he didn't usually have the opportunity to sit in the yamen, so he didn't really care about the situation of the main hall. Today was the first time in 3 years that the magistrate sat in the yamen. But the beam on top of his head had long been eaten by termites, and it was also soaked by the heavy rain last night. Because of this, after the magistrate sat down, he slammed the gavel in satisfaction, and the beam above him collapsed with a crack, smashing him to death on the spot. Not only was the magistrate of Rong City smashed to death. At that time, the prefectural magistrate, the official registrar, and the prefectural military officer who were sitting on the left and right of the magistrate all suffered the same fate. The prefectural magistrate was still unconscious, and no one knew if he would wake up. The official registrar and the prefectural military officer each lost a leg and couldn't do anything. Because of this, the prefectural magistrate, prefectural military officer, and official registrar were the arresters. The magistrate of Rong City slammed the gavel in the gavel, and the martial arts expert Zhao that Li Yunxin saw last night became the most powerful person in Rong City. This arrestor Zhao was skilled in martial arts, and he also had courage and heroism. The riot in the city started because of what he did last night. In addition, his entire family had died in the hands of the demons, so he couldn't wait to gather all the people in the city and no longer be oppressed by the demons. So now he was like a fish in water. Dragging his injured body, he began to take care of the affairs in the city. He was in charge of the compensation for the dead, the food and shelter of the living, the cleaning and rebuilding of the dilapidated houses, and the inspection of the government servants. He had never done so many things before, but now that he was doing it, it was done in an orderly manner. When Li Yunxin walked on the street for a while, he saw someone take out a portrait. He didn't know who the man in the portrait was. But he wore a 9-beaded curtain, a black python robe, and a gold-threaded jade belt around his waist. It was probably the portrait of an emperor of the Yu state. A group of people in Rong City gradually gathered in front of the emperor's portrait, worshipping and crying. If the Taizu was still alive, there wouldn't be such a situation. Li Yunxin knew that this was probably the emperor who founded the Yu state. People always had an instinctive reverence for ancient, distant, and mysterious people or things. It was easier to beautify the old days when they were unhappy. For example, they now regarded the Taizu of the Yu state as a retainer. This was probably what Arrestor Zhao was happy to see. Worshipping a human emperor was better than worshipping a demon. But he didn't use the portrait of the current emperor. His heart was probably hurt too. Therefore, Li Yunxin stopped at the intersection and hesitated for a while. He wanted to go to Nanmuju, ask Wang Bojian some questions, and then think about how to go to Hongling. But the current situation in Rong City made him think of something else. He didn't know people like Wang Bojian very well, but he could easily understand people like Arrestor Zhao. Moreover, Constable Zhao looked somewhat familiar to him. The first time he saw Arrestor Zhao was last night on the dark long street. But Li Yunxin felt that he had seen him somewhere else. Chapter 310. Constable Zhao's real name was Zhou Xian. When he was young, he learned martial arts from a martial arts master who passed by Rongqing and was good at using a knife. The martial arts master did not say the name of the knife, but it was enough to make him invincible in Rongqing for decades to come. The Zhao family he came from was said to have some connection with the powerful Zhao family in the Qin kingdom. But that was hundreds of years ago and had long been forgotten. His family had a genealogy that went back 500 or 600 years. It could be said that he was connected to one of the people in the Qin kingdom's Zhao family. But he didn't know if it was because later generations wanted to put gold on their faces when they compiled the genealogy. It was not rare. But no matter what, he was now a lonely man. Zhao Xing, whose soul was seized by deep sorrow, was sitting in the magistrate's detention room, not knowing where to vent the sorrow in his heart. He was wrapped in a large cloak and his upper body was naked under the cloak. His body was wrapped in bandages, but his wounds still stubbornly seeped blood. This made him smell very bad. The smell of blood mixed with the smell of medicine, like grass fertilizer fermenting under the hot sun for a whole day in summer. But Zhao Xing's complexion was not bad. For a person who had fought with demons for a whole night, suffered several serious injuries, and had just dealt with a lot of urgent affairs in Qingdu without rest, Zhao Xing's complexion was not bad. This was probably due to the martial arts he learned when he was young. Normal people who suffered such serious injuries would have died long ago. Right now he stared at a square seal on the table. The seal was carved from yellow rain stone and it was square. This was a square seal. The magistrate could not use his big seal to deal with matters, so the people below him used the seal to deal with matters. Zhao Xing had imagined a long time ago that he would one day hold this seal, but he did not expect this result. His wife and old mother were both buried last night, buried in the mouths of demons. The city had already counted the real bodies of 11 demons, and they were all placed in the courtyard outside the detention room. Zhao Xing went to take a look and found that the 2 demons he killed were not among them. Last night the total number of demons was 13. This meant that all the demon cultivators in Rongqing, except for Taoist Wolf from Pingyuan Monastery, were all dead last night. Zhao Xing personally poured feces and dog blood on the demon's corpse. However, this was still not enough to vent the hatred in his heart. He was not an ignorant villager. He knew that every injustice had its perpetrator and every debt had its debtor. It was the fox demon who had killed his mother and wife, but was it just the fox demon? Behind the fox demon was Taoist Wolf, who had yet to reveal himself. But was it just Taoist Wolf? And the Sword Palace? The Sword Palace and the Imperial Court. The Imperial Court should have taken care of the people, and the Emperor should have loved the people like his own children. However, did those who lived behind the high walls in the capital care about their lives or deaths? The world had been ravaged by the demons of the Sword Palace. Where was the Emperor? Zhao Xing was more experienced and knowledgeable than ordinary people. But even so, there was a limit. Now, for instance, he knew whom he should hate, knew why he had come to this and why so many others had come to a similar end, but he did not know what to do about it. Or rather, he only knew one way. That way was difficult, rebellious, and required more courage than drawing his sword against the demons last night. Normally, Zhao Xing and many others would not dare to have such thoughts. But right now, the pain and drowsiness had accumulated too many things in his mind that could excite him. The grief of losing his loved ones made him want to indulge his emotions as much as he wanted, to escape this reality for a short time. However, reality was bloody in front of him. He could still smell the stench outside the room and the burning smell in the city. This situation made him stare at the table stamp on the table. Then he suddenly stood up, grabbed it and raised it above his head. At this time 5 people rushed in from outside. They were all bailiffs under Zhao Xing's command, now sent out to tidy up the affairs of the city and were extremely busy. They usually did not do any official work, so how could they deal with a situation like this? Because of the huge pile of things that they could not deal with, they could only rush back to the yamen to ask Zhao Xing for advice. In their hearts, Zhao Xing was a person with both courage and wisdom and was their backbone at this time. So when they saw this scene, they were slightly stunned. Zhao Xing was also stunned. The bailiffs quickly realized that Zhao Xing's expression was strange, so they only covered their noses and blocked the door, not stepping in. After looking at each other for a while, Li Guang, who had been with Zhao Xing for the longest, hesitated and said, "What are you doing, brother? Be careful that you break the stamp and the masters will blame you." Zhao Xing did not speak. He looked at Li Guang, then turned to look at the stamp that he had raised. When Li Guang opened his mouth, someone else said, "Now that we are the ones doing this, we are afraid that the masters will blame us." This world. When Zhou Xian heard his words, the expression on his face suddenly eased. He looked at the stamp in his hand again, slowly put it down and sat back on the chair. The bailiffs did not know what Zhou Xian was thinking, but they knew that he had calmed down, so they rushed into the room and closed the door, isolating the stench in the courtyard. Zhou Xian only sat and did not speak, but the bailiffs started to talk. They were all old people who had been with Zhou Xian for a long time. They had not slept for a night and their brothers and family members had died. How could they get rid of the depression and sorrow in their hearts if they did not speak at this time? But they knew that their Constable Zhao's situation was the most miserable, so they could only sigh at the unfairness of the world and did not know what to do in the future. They did not know what would happen to them after they killed the demon. According to their understanding of the district magistrate, registrar and prefectural officer's temperament, they were afraid that there would really be a change in the future, and they would hand over the people who did this to them as scapegoats. They talked all at once and actually forgot about the serious matter in the future. Zhou Xian did not scold them but just sat quietly and listened, staring at the stamp. Constable Zhao only stood up when they were tired of talking and looked at Constable Zhao. He shook the cloak that he was wearing and it fell to the ground. Li Guang hurried over to put it on him, but he pushed him away. Then he calmly walked out from behind the table, stood in front of the 5 people and said, "What's the use of all this nonsense? Do you still expect the masters to be merciful and help us? Who's been helping us in the past?" After saying this, he reached his hand out from the waist of one of the constables and pulled out his knife. He said coldly, "Last night, you even dared to kill the demon and now you're afraid?" The constables did not know what Zhou Xian meant by this, but only Li Guang frowned. After saying this, Zhou Xian ignored them and walked out the door with his knife. The constables were stunned for a while and wanted to follow. But when they reached the door, they suddenly heard Li Guang shout, "Come back." Among the constables, Li Guang was the most experienced, and he was considered Zhou Xian's right-hand man. After hearing his words, he retracted his hand that was about to push the door open, and turned to look at Zhou Xian. He was sitting on a chair by the window. Li Guang, on the other hand, frowned, closed his eyes and breathed out heavily. He said in a low voice, "Wait." The remaining 4 people looked at each other. How would they know what Zhou Xian and Li Guang were doing? After waiting for a quarter of an hour, they suddenly heard a faint scream. The voice sounded familiar. It sounded like the voice of the prefectural magistrate. The 4 constables jumped up and were about to ask what was going on, but they saw Li Guang still frowning and closing his eyes without saying a word. They were stunned for a long time. After the time it takes to burn half an incense stick, they heard the sound of a knife being dragged on the ground and heavy footsteps outside the room. Li Guang then opened his eyes. The door was kicked open by Zhou Xian. When he went out, his upper body was covered in bandages that were bleeding. Now that he was back, his upper body was soaked in blood. But no one cared about the blood on his body. They all stared at his left hand, speechless. In his left hand were 3 human heads. Zhou Xian leaned against the door frame and panted for a while. Holding the knife and the bloody head, he scanned the 5 people in the room. Then he raised his hand and threw the first head on the ground. Blood splattered everywhere from the neck, but the 5 people in the room did not know how to dodge. "This district magistrate, he usually bullies us brothers for fun. Our salaries are not paid every year and he only said that there is no money in the province. But don't we know that he has embezzled our salaries? If my old mother could have 2 full meals a day, how could she have become weak?" He gritted his teeth and threw the second head on the ground. "This registrar, the Taoist wolf in the Peaceful Plains Temple, is a good friend. 1 human and 1 demon, they usually recite poems and write poems. Now he is going to follow those demons." He paused, took 2 deep breaths and threw the prefectural magistrate's head on the ground. After a moment of silence, he shook his head. "Zhou Tong is not a bad person. But when I showed him the 2 heads, he wanted to kill me. Kill me as well." The room was filled with the thick smell of blood. The constables' faces were pale. They stared at the 3 heads on the ground in a daze, speechless. Zhou Xian panted a few times and coughed twice. With a clang, he threw the knife in his hand on the ground and said in a deep voice, "I have killed the masters. As for you, are you going to kill me or follow me?" There was a moment of silence. They could hear the rapid breathing of the few people, the chirping of cicadas in the courtyard, and the screams and cries of the people in the city further away. Li Guang suddenly stood up, kicked the head of the district magistrate in front of him away and said loudly, "Now the people have no way to live. Look at the state of Rong City today. It may be the state of other places tomorrow. The demons have bullied us for hundreds of years. Where are the masters? When great ancestor conquered the country of you, he never thought that it would become like this today. If it were not for those evil people, the world would not be like this. Brother Zhou Xian, you killed them well. As he spoke, he strode into the room and bent down to pick up the knife. He offered it to Zhou Xian with both hands. Kill all these traitors for the sake of his majesty and great ancestor. We will have a bright future. Hearing his words, Zhou Xian also tightly pursed his lips, and from his widened nostrils exhaled a thick breath of air. When Li Guang offered the knife again, Zhou Xian gripped it tightly in his hand and glared fiercely at the other 4 people in the room. Don't you think this makes sense? The 4 people could not say anything else. When Zhou Xian asked, they hurriedly stood up and kowtowed. We are willing to rebel with brother. Thus, the 6 of them discussed for a while in the room before mixing the blood from the heads of the district magistrate, the registrar, and the prefectural officer with wine and drank it together. Following that, the 5 of them listened to Zhou Xian's instructions for a while and split up to go to different places in the city. Zhou Xian was left alone in the room and slumped on the chair. He stared at the stamp on the table for a while, then slowly closed his eyes. He was really too tired. He knew that there were many things that he should be doing right now. But his body and mind were on the verge of collapse. He only wanted to close his eyes and rest for a while. But he did not expect that the moment he closed his eyes, he would fall into a deep sleep. He did not know how long he slept, and he did not know what time it was. Zhou Xian suddenly saw a handsome young man in a white linen robe walk through the door and into the room. This young man had sharp eyebrows, bright eyes, red lips, and white teeth. His jet-black hair was neatly combed and held in place with a jade hairpin inlaid with gold. His loose linen robe fluttered without any wind, and when he walked, there was a faint mist around him as if he was a living immortal. When he entered, he only smiled at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian was shocked and raised his hand to grab the knife on his waist, but then he found that his body could not move as if it was not his. The handsome young man bowed to Zhou Xian and said, "Thank you, Grandpa Zhou, congratulations." Although Zhou Xian could not move, he could speak. In surprise, he opened his mouth and asked, "Who are you?" The young man smiled again. "I am the true god of Wei River, Dragon King. I was originally suppressed in the river by the demons of Yu State for hundreds of years, and my position as a god was taken by a thief. Last night, Grandpa Zhao killed the demons of Rong City and caused chaos in the city, so I was able to break the prohibition of the demons of Yu State and escape. So last night, I also repaid Grandpa Zhao's kindness by using clouds and rain to solve the disaster of Rong City. Today I saw the purple aura in Rong City's government office, and guessed that another Shinryu was born, so I came to meet you." Zhao Xian was stunned when he heard this, and then he was overjoyed. He quickly stared at the young man with wide eyes. "What is purple aura? What is Shinryu?" The young man still smiled. "Grandpa Zhao just rose up, don't you know?" But his tone changed and his face calmed down again. "Although Grandpa Zhao knows about the purple aura Shinryu, do you also know how to clean up the emperor's side, fight for the world, and get rid of demons?" Zhao Xian frowned and was about to speak. But the young man suddenly widened his eyes and shouted, "Ah, why did someone dig up your dragon vein?" Then he turned to stare at Zhao Xian. "Grandpa Zhao, do you know where your dragon vein is? That Hongling is your dragon head." After saying these 2 sentences, the figure suddenly shook and then a cold wind blew in the room. Zhao Xian woke up with a start. As soon as he opened his eyes, he immediately reached for the waist knife on the table, sat up straight and stared at the room with wide eyes. But where was the young man in hemp clothes who called himself Dragon King in the room? The floor was still dripping with blood. He was stunned for a while, then sighed and put the waist knife back on the table. But after 2 breaths, he was stunned again. He found that the wounds on his body had all healed. Chapter 311. Zhao Xian didn't sleep for long, only a quarter of an hour. After another 15 minutes, Li Guang came back alone. Li Guang was Zhao Xian's old brother. Thus he pushed the door open and walked in quietly, as if he was worried that he would wake Zhao Xian up. Perhaps it was because of this thought that when he entered the door, he found that Zhao Xian was not asleep but was staring at him with his eyes wide open. He was startled. "Brother, this is..." But he swallowed his words, because he saw that Zhao Xian was completely different from half an hour ago. Previously, Zhao Xian was covered in blood. Even if he had some vigor, it was due to sorrow and pain. It was the vigor of a cornered beast. But now the blood on Zhou Xian's body was gone. His upper body was bare as he sat behind the table with his back straight. His dark and strong muscles were as hard as a lump of iron, without a single scar on them. He looked like he had just slept for 8 to 10 hours, and there was no sign of fatigue on his face. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at him. No, he was not staring at him, he was thinking about something and was in a trance. What was going on? Li Guang's eyes widened in shock. He stuttered, "I was worried about you, so I came back to see. Brother, how come your wounds are gone?" After a while, Zhou Xian slowly turned to look at Li Guang. He stared at him for a while and suddenly said, "Just now the Dragon King of Wei River came to me in my dream." Li Guang let out a confused, "Ah." Zhou Xian continued, "The Dragon King said that I was the son of Xinryu. The son of Xinryu said that he was freed by the chaos in the city last night." He paused. Then he lowered his head and lightly slammed his fist on the table. "So it's destiny. My wife and mother died in the hands of the demons. Is it destiny?" Li Guang seemed to be in a daze. He blinked and called out to Zhou Xian, "Brother, what are you talking about?" Zhou Xian raised his head again. The light in his eyes was gone. It was all contained within his body. His aura changed again. Just now he was aggressive and capable, but now he was calm and composed like a general. "Look at my injury." Zhou Xian stood up. "This is the proof that the Dragon King told me in my dream. I have the help of God. I am the son of Xinryu." Half an hour ago, Zhou Xian was still deeply worried and was planning to go all out and fight to the death. Half an hour later, Zhou Xian suddenly became full of confidence because of a dream. This was very strange in Li Guang's eyes. But it wasn't just the situation that was strange. There was also the people. Li Guang had never seen Zhou Xian like this. Zhou Xian used to be a famous person in Rong City and he had a heroic air about him. But in the end he was just an ordinary person. But now for some reason Zhou Xian made him feel a little unfamiliar. It was as if he had suddenly become a person on the top of a mountain or on the horizon. A little far. He really didn't know whether it was good or bad. Because this change had happened too quickly. He didn't know what Zhou Xian meant by the Dragon King appearing in his dreams. After all, they were people who lived with demons. Many people had seen demons with their own eyes, and demons called themselves immortals. So, unlike other people who had romantic fantasies about immortals and demons, the people of Yu knew better what kind of people those who called themselves gods were. For example, in the Qin kingdom, if there was a god appearing somewhere, people would think that it was a kind and gentle god. But in the Yu kingdom, if there was a god appearing, people's first thought was to stay as far away as possible, knowing that it was probably a demon. Li Guang stared at Zhou Xian for a while and said hesitantly, "Brother, maybe it's because of the martial arts that you practice. Didn't you tell me a few years ago that your martial arts were taught to you by a master who passed by? It's very mysterious. Maybe there is some secret to your martial arts that can only be forced out in a life and death situation. So now..." He paused and sighed. "Brother, do you not know what kind of people those gods are? How did we end up like this?" Zhou Xian didn't listen to him. He only furrowed his brows and said, "Definitely not." He waved his hand as if to sweep away some thoughts and repeated, "Absolutely not. What the Dragon King told me in my dream was true. They didn't die for no reason. It was my time they weren't killed." As he said this, he slowly sat back in his chair. His brows were tightly furrowed as if he was angry with himself. It also seemed like he had sunk into some kind of paranoid emotion. Li Guang was slightly startled. He suddenly understood why Zhou Xian was like this. Perhaps he didn't care about the son of Xinryu as much as he appeared to care. It was just that his wife and mother were already dead. If their deaths had some value instead of being randomly torn apart by a demon, it would have been easier to accept. But he didn't know if Zhou Xian was aware of this. So he tried to persuade him again. "Brother, you were tired just now, that's why you had that dream. Instead of talking about gods and demons, why don't you believe in our martial arts?" Zhou Xian suddenly raised his head and looked at him. "What martial arts?" He paused for a moment. "Do you really know what martial arts I practice? When did I ever tell you about it?" Li Guang was startled again. After a while she said, "Brother, didn't you say that when you were young, more than 30 years ago, you met a middle-aged man in black clothes and a black saber who passed by Qingdu, Taught you martial arts and then left on a black horse? Hearing this, Zhou Xian snorted angrily. It's true that there was that person and that thing. Hey, but do you know what he taught me? That person taught me for a few days, but he only said that he was going to teach me some kind of heart technique. He taught me some heart technique, but he always told me to comprehend it on my own. In a year, I spent 10 months comprehending it on my own, and the other 2 months were taught to him by me. In the end, that person left. When did he teach me any real martial arts? It was only after I asked some martial arts masters in private about the moves and stances, and then I slowly pondered over it on my own. That's how I got what I have today. How can I tell you about these things? After all, it's better to have a master's reputation. Now you're saying that the pain on my body was cured by that martial arts? That's impossible. Li Guang never thought that Zhou Xian had such a secret. He blinked his eyes and was speechless. Seeing that he was speechless, Zhou Xian lowered his head disinterestedly. After a moment of silence, he looked up at Li Guang. I know what you're worried about. But now, no matter whether you believe me or not, the arrow is already on the string. There must be a method. You've always been meticulous. Just now there were too many people, so I didn't want to ask you. Now let me ask you again. What do you think the chances of us succeeding are? Chapter 3:12. Hearing Zhou Xian's question, Li Guang sighed in his heart. What are the chances of winning? He looked up at Zhou Xian. Brother, let's escape. Zhou Xian frowned. Escape. Brother, don't you know the situation in Rong City? Li Guang looked at Zhou Xian worriedly. He felt like his old friend and superior had gone crazy because of the dream. Brother said he wanted to rebel, but I was afraid that the 4 of them would really take him away. That's why I agreed. Now I came back to persuade you. You can't stay in Rong City any longer. The sooner you leave, the sooner you can survive. He took a deep breath and continued, Brother, think about it. There are only a few hundred people we can use in Rong City. They are all former helpers. They used to be scoundrels in the streets. Brother, you know what kind of people they are. There are only a few dozen of them that I can use. Even if there are only a few dozen of them, what will they use in a battle? The armors in the warehouse are no longer usable. Many of the swords and spears have been exchanged by the master for money. The ones left in the warehouse are just rusty old weapons. The threads of the leather armor are all rotten. When I lift it up, it will fall apart. I only found out about this a few days ago. It's not enough to arm a few dozen people. Are we going to use clubs to fight? And outside the city? Li Guang sighed. Brother, don't you know that the Chong residence camp is 200 miles away? There are close to 10,000 soldiers stationed there, and there are a few thousand of them who can fight. Once they know that something has happened in Rong City, the thousands of people will come. Our lives will be over. Li Guang sighed repeatedly as he spoke, his heart burning with anxiety. But after hearing his words, Zhou Xian smiled. I know. Of course I know. An hour ago I was thinking about these things as well. But after that dream just now, I've thought about it again. Hey, what's the point of all this? The world has suffered from the demons for a long time. Zhou Xian stood up and looked out of the window with his hands behind his back. He looked like a general overlooking the battlefield. You said there are only a few dozen people following us? I don't think so. How many families have been destroyed in this situation? It was a good time for the crowd to be excited. I hate those demons as much as I hate them. They just lack a leader. Weapon staff. Brother Li Guang, since ancient times, there were people who used plants and trees as weapons. Are we even worse than the ancients now? The current royal family of the kingdom of Qing was just a group of refugees when they rose up 500 years ago. But now that we have a city, what is there to be afraid of? You're talking about charging into the military camp again. Zhou Xian sneered. Thousands of soldiers. Where did you get thousands of soldiers? The men of Qingdu are a mess. Do you think the generals of the Chongfu camp are all cautious and conscientious? The imperial court is controlled by the demons of the Sword Palace. The demons are most afraid of the imperial court's military being at its peak, so they have been playing tricks in the dark. They have also made those generals into a mess. When you came to Qingdu, I had a brother who joined the Chongfu camp from the army. Now he is a junior commander. He has 500 soldiers under him, but do you know how many soldiers he has? Zhou Xian clenched his fist and flipped it over. Only 200. He alone eats the salary of 300 people. And this is because he is timid and doesn't dare to make a big fuss. With this kind of Chongfu, How many people do you think he can bring to Chengdu? He's the one who came to Chengdu. Chengdu is surrounded by mountains. First, have them come over the mountains. After they come, we close the city gates and don't come out. Will they be able to take us down? In one breath, Zhou Xian analyzed all the things that Li Guang was worried about with reason and evidence. On the contrary, it surprised Li Guang. He had never known that Zhou Xian thought about so many things. But he still hesitated for a moment and said, even if what you say is the truth. But there is another thing. Perhaps the imperial court is not scary. But the demons of the Sword Palace. Brother, they are probably not something that high walls can defend against. Zhou Xian furrowed his brows. You still don't believe that the Dragon King came to you in your dreams? With the Dragon King helping me, why should I be afraid of those demons? Li Guang was so anxious he stamped his feet. I believe you. Does everyone believe you, brother? If we really start a rebellion, those people will retreat the moment they think about the demons. Are you going to just tell them that the Dragon King is helping us? Zhou Xian stared angrily at Li Guang for a while. Finally, he snorted and sat down. He seemed to have something to say but didn't know if he should say it. After the time it takes for half an incense to burn, he lowered his voice and said, actually, there are other helpers. After a moment of silence, he said awkwardly, but we can't use this unless we have no other choice. As he spoke, his face revealed a mixture of anger, shame, and depression. It seemed that if Li Guang hadn't pressed him, he would have buried this matter in his heart for the rest of his life. His expression made Li Guang curious. What do you mean, brother? Zhou Xian hesitated for a while, then stood up and walked to the door. Opening the door, he looked left and right to make sure that there was no one outside. Then he turned to Li Guang. It's fine to tell you, but you must not leak this matter. Otherwise, before we succeed, we will become the target of everyone's criticism. Li Guang realized that there was something fishy about this. After thinking for a while, he said seriously, brother, tell me. After so many years together, don't you trust me? Zhou Xian smiled bitterly. Of course I trust you. That's why I'm telling you. Listen carefully. A few days ago when I asked you to come with me to kill the demons, what did I say? I told you that the demons in the city are only at the state of consciousness and have just taken human form. They are only fearless because of their thick skin. We have a few hundred people against them, so we have a chance of winning. At that time you asked me what consciousness and transformation were and how I knew about them. Do you still remember? Li Guang thought for a while and nodded. Remember. At that time I didn't understand how you knew about these things, but you just brushed it off. I'll tell you now. It was my brother who told me. Zhou Xian looked at Li Guang. That brother of mine is in the Stone Forest Mountain of the Kingdom of Qing. Rong City is in the main branch of the Stone Forest Mountain, and the Stone Forest Mountain is in the main branch. Li Guang blinked. Brother? Since when did you have a brother in the Kingdom of Yu? I know about the Stone Forest Mountain. Isn't it the border city of the Kingdom of Qing? It's only a few hundred miles away from our Rong City. The road is rugged and difficult to traverse. In the Kingdom of Qing, it's a small city that no one cares about. How did you get to know people there? Zhou Xian was silent for a while. We didn't get to know each other. That's my brother. Li Guang's eyes widened. He was speechless. Zhou Xian's mother had just passed away last night. He and Zhou Xian had known each other for many years and knew each other very well. But he didn't know where Zhou Xian got a brother, and he was in the Stone Forest Mountain of the Kingdom of Qing? Zhou Xian sighed. It's a long story. But now you know that my mother wasn't my birth mother. I only found out by chance that my brother was in the Stone Forest Mountain of the Kingdom of Yu a few years ago. We were born from the same mother and looked almost the same. We were separated when we were young. Right now he's in the Stone Forest Mountain. He's also a constable. He was the one who told me all the things I know. The help that I'm talking about as a last resort is also on his side. Li Guang took some time to digest Zhou Xian's words. He thought about it and said hesitantly, You're saying, if things go wrong, Stone Forest Mountain will send someone to help us? But your brother is only a constable. The situation in the Kingdom of Qing is different from the situation in the Kingdom of Yu. There are no demons causing trouble there. I'm afraid your brother can't make the decision, right? Zhou Xian furrowed his brows and was silent for a long time. He then suddenly said, It's not people. It's demons. What? It's demons. These words came out of my mouth and into your ears. I can't say it to a third person. I'm only telling you, We still have a way out, but we might not need it. When Zhou Xian spoke, his tone was not as heroic as before. It was as if he was slightly apprehensive and guilty, but he was doing his best to suppress that feeling. After saying so much, he paused. Seeing that Li Guang didn't seem like he didn't want to hear it, he said, "The situation in the kingdom of Qing's Stone Forest Mountain is not better than ours. It's even scarier than ours. Although our Rongqing is being bullied by demons, we don't always have to worry about our lives. But in the kingdom of Qing's Stone Forest Mountain Range," Zhao Xing gritted his teeth, "there are demons that eat people. In the Stone Forest Mountain Range, near Stone Forest Mountain Range, there is a Pitfall Mountain. In the Pitfall Mountain Range there is a big demon. There are hundreds of small demons under the Great Demon's command. They eat people every 2 to 3 days. At first they abducted people from the city to eat. But later more and more people were eaten. Almost everyone in the city fled. My brother became a constable. You have to know that at that time it was not much different from our Rongqing. The old men above constable either died or fled. He was the master of the city. So my younger brother thought of a way. Our Rongqing is at the end of the Stone Forest Mountain Range, so we can get by. But the kingdom of Qing's Stone Forest Mountain Range is in the desert wasteland. There is little rain and it is difficult to pass through. Thus, it is one of the most remote and desolate places in the kingdom of Qing. Because of this, the nearby prefectures of the kingdom of Qing usually send the exiled criminals to the kingdom of Qing's Stone Forest Mountain Range. So this method of his, you should know about it, right? Li Guang listened in a daze. He paused for a while before saying, "Could it be, he took the initiative to send those criminals to the demons to eat?" Zhao Xing nodded in silence. "I don't know where he got the courage and luck. He broke into the demon's lair in the Pitfall Mountain Range to negotiate and succeeded. Since then he sent 5 or 6 people to the demons every month. Slowly the demons stopped kidnapping people from the kingdom of Qing. But he still sent 5 or 6 people every month." Li Guang frowned. "Where did so many criminals come from?" Zhao Xing glanced at him. "There were not enough criminals, but there were always criminals in the city. There were no criminals, but there were the old, the weak, the sick and the disabled. They secretly kidnapped them." Li Guang's eyes widened. This kind of thing, how? Zhao Xing sighed. "But after that the kingdom of Qing became peaceful. There were also more people. It could be considered a peaceful life. So, how should I say this? I don't know how to say it. As for the help, it was the demons of the Pitfall Mountain. My younger brother often sent people to the Pitfall Mountain, so he gradually became familiar with some of the small leaders and learned a lot of things. I heard that the big demon of the Pitfall Mountain is 100 times more powerful than the Sword Palace's Yang Jianzi. A small leader under him can easily kill hundreds of demon cultivators like the ones in Rong City. So, if there is no other choice." Li Guang stood up abruptly. "Absolutely not." He stared at Zhao Xing. "Brother, are you stupid? Why are we rebelling? Isn't it because we are being bullied by the demons? If we attract the demons of the Pitfall Mountain, wouldn't it be like drinking poison to quench thirst? Brother, do you want to send people to the demons in the future?" His tone was firm and unyielding without the slightest bit of mercy. Zhao Xing did not lose his temper. He quickly said, "I am not that stupid. Unless there is no other choice, why would I?" "You mustn't, brother." Li Guang interrupted him again. "You absolutely mustn't. We'd rather die than do such a thing." Zhao Xing waved his hand. "Forget it, I am not that kind of person." "Then let's not talk about this anymore. Let's not talk about anything else. I will think about it for now. Come back in the afternoon, I will talk to you again, okay?" It seemed that Li Guang's objection had made him lose all interest. He walked to the door and opened it. "I will take a break for now. Maybe my mind is muddled. Give me some time to think about it." Li Guang did not say anything else. He hesitated for a while, then sighed and left. Once he left, Zhao Xing closed the door again. After another 15 minutes, when Li Guang's footsteps faded away, he let out a long sigh. The stench outside the window seemed to have lessened, or maybe it was just his imagination. But the noises became louder. All kinds of noises. The chirping of the autumn cicadas, the noise of the people in the city, the sound of the window paper fluttering in the breeze, and even the sound of his own heartbeat. He did not tell Li Guang about these things, but he knew it meant that he was not the same person as before. He was a secular martial artist. and his martial arts used to be considered a high-level third-rate martial artist. But now he knew he was different. He could almost use inner vision. In the martial arts world, this was a mysterious realm. It meant that he was no longer a third-rate martial artist, but a second-rate one. All these changes were because of that dream. Before that dream he was full of pain, anger, and melancholy. However, after that dream his body underwent such a huge change. Li Guang said that he was wrong about it. But how could the vigorous internal energy in his body be thought for nothing? This was also the best proof that the Dragon King had appeared in his dream. Zhou Xian stayed in the room for a while, then suddenly knelt on the ground. He kowtowed 3 times with sincerity. He thought for a while, then straightened up and kowtowed 3 more times. After 3 kowtows and 9 kowtows, he put his palms together and whispered in a trembling voice, "Wei River Dragon King, Wei River Dragon King. If that dream was real, please show yourself to me in my dream again. I have something to ask you, something to ask you." Chapter 3:13. He prayed for a while and then stopped to listen. But there was no change in the room. The cicadas outside were still chirping. Zhou Xian kowtowed a few more times and finished the whole set. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, he slowly got up from the ground and sat on the wide wooden chair in the room. After a quarter of an hour, another quarter of an hour. But there was no movement, as if it was really his own imagination. Zhou Xian finally sighed and lowered his head. Perhaps the Dragon King did not hear his prayers. He had just been freed. Would he have a lot of things to deal with like other people? Or was he not sincere enough? Did he need to offer sacrifices? He began to fall into a slight panic and doubt, and felt that the cicadas outside the window were getting more and more annoying, until he heard a voice outside the door. The voice was soft, but the tone was quite dignified. Zhou Xian opened the door to receive the decree of the Dragon King. Zhou Xian's eyes widened in an instant, and then he jumped up from the chair and rushed to the door in 2 steps. He did not have time to think too much and reached out to open the door to look outside. But he did not see anyone. He was just about to frown and step into the courtyard when he suddenly heard someone shouting in panic, "How dare Zhou Xian? How dare he rush into the carriage of the Dragon God Messenger?" Zhou Xian looked down and immediately retracted his foot as if he had been electrocuted. The door of his room had a threshold which, according to the Yaman's custom, was also quite high, up to his ankles. Just outside the threshold there was a group of people in bright armor. These people were only level with the threshold, and there were 13 of them divided into 2 rows on the left and right. In front of them, there were 4 knights in red helmets and red armor, riding little red horses, holding shiny toothpick-sized swords in their hands. In the middle there were 4 servants in green, working together to carry a golden roofless sedan. There was a person sitting in the sedan, wearing a green-gray official robe, with a patch embroidered on his chest, and a winged black gauze hat on his head. He should be the self-proclaimed Dragon God Messenger. Behind him, there were also 4 soldiers in green armor with sabers hanging from their waists. They held official titles and umbrellas in their hands, but it was impossible to see what was written on them. However, the reason why he said, "There should be 4, was because Zhou Xian had accidentally stepped on the last foot soldier when he took a step forward. The small umbrella fell to the ground and the little person also lay down, unable to get up. It seemed that one of its legs had been broken. Now the 13 little people all looked up at Zhou Xian. After their gazes met for a breath, Zhou Xian took 2 steps back as if he had seen a ghost and almost slammed the door shut. The little person in the middle was not flustered at all. He raised his eyebrows and shouted, "Hurry up and receive the imperial edict. What a disgrace. Give me your hand." The little man was only a little taller than Zhou Xian's fist, but he did not fear him at all. This kind of calm demeanor actually calmed Zhou Xian down as well. He took a few deep breaths before widening his eyes. "Are you really the messenger of the Dragon King? What about Dragon King? Why didn't Dragon King come to see me?" The little person was furious. "How dare you? How honorable is the Wei River Dragon King? Do you think you can see him just because you want to? The Dragon King sympathizes with your sincerity and sent me here to deliver the imperial edict. Yet you are not kneeling on the ground and respectfully receiving the imperial edict. Don't you know how terrible the wrath of the gods is?" Zhou Xian heard that the little person's words were getting harsher and more imposing. Only then did he calm down a little. He had no time to think too much and could only accept the imperial edict. However, he did not kneel on the ground. Instead, he just leaned over on the ground and stretched out one hand to the doorsill. Thus, the four little people carrying the sedan chair straightened their arms and lifted the small sedan chair. The little official on the sedan chair walked to Zhou Xian's palm. Zhou Xian then stood up and carried the little person back to the table. He placed him on the table. After thinking for a while, he respectfully bowed. "What decree does the heavenly priest have to announce?" The little person kept a straight face. He took out a small scroll from his big sleeve and opened it. He cleared his throat and said, "The Dragon King asked me to ask you. You have done a meritorious deed in rescuing the Emperor, but there was no time to reward you. Now that the Dragon King has returned to the Dragon Palace, he wants to know what kind of reward you want." Hearing this, Zhou Xian's uneasiness and worry suddenly disappeared. He never thought that the Wei River Dragon King was really a god who did things in the ancient style. He still remembered to reward me according to my meritorious deed? He was stunned for a while because of this sudden joy. Then he hurriedly said, "Reward? What kind of reward? Do I have to mention it myself?" The little person impatiently said, "Of course you have to say it yourself. My Dragon King is omnipotent. There is nothing he can't do. Even if that person dies and falls into the cycle of reincarnation." At this point he seemed to have said something wrong. He hurriedly changed his words. "Say it first. Tell me first." Zhou Xian blinked and was silent for a long time. Then he turned around and paced anxiously in the room. After about the time for half an incense stick to burn, he made up his mind. He fiercely stamped his feet and suddenly turned his head. "If I start a rebellion in Rong City, can the Dragon King help me kill the demons of Yu Kingdom and unify the world?" Hearing his words, the little person laughed in a shrill voice. "Ah, how dare you! Before I came here, the Dragon King told me that this must be your request. So he also asked me to tell you. I can help you." Zhou Xian opened his mouth in disbelief. "Really?" The little person waved his hand. "It's not what you think. Listen carefully. The Dragon King knows that you want to start a rebellion. He also knows that you have no useful people in the city of Wei. He also knows that you are just a constable and don't have any talent to be a great general. So he asked me to tell you a good thing. Thousands of miles away from Rong City, there is a mountain in the Qin Kingdom called Chuyun Mountain. There is a fort on the mountain called the Black Stockade Fort. The master of the Black Stockade Fort is named Ingjuren. He is a great general with hundreds of soldiers under his command. My Dragon King received his kindness in his previous life. Now he knows that he has a hard life, so he can combine the two things into one. I will give you a time and place. You can send people there to wait for Ingjuren. At that time, say that the Dragon King asked your people to pick him up. Then you can use him and make him a great general in Rong City." Hearing his words, Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Because what the little official said now was a bit too true. He was a man of fervent expectations, but he was not a fool at heart. So he felt something was wrong. He had thought that the promise of the gods should be more mysterious and ethereal. For example, to help him change his fate and make him invincible and invincible. But now that it had suddenly become such a concrete method, it made people feel vigilant in their hearts. But the little official didn't care what he was thinking. He continued to say, "My Dragon King also knows that you don't have anyone around you who can help you plan. So I will give you another good thing. 400 miles from here to Rong City, there is a large lake called Dongting. There is a mountain in Dongting Lake called Junshan. There is a palace on Junshan called Ziwei Palace. There is a hermit in Ziwei Palace called Lu Gongzan. My Dragon King received his kindness in his previous life. Send people to Ziwei Palace on Mount Lord Dongting and you will see the hermit. Tell him that the Dragon King asked him to come out of the mountain. Then you can use him and make him the brain of Rong City. With these two people, one civil and one military, you can keep Rong City safe. Then if you encounter demons again, my Dragon King will send 4 divine dragon envoys to help. They can also keep you safe. What do you think?" Zhou Xian hesitated for a while and then said, "Thank you, Dragon King, for your kind intentions. But Chuyun Mountain, Black Stockade, they sound like a bandit stronghold. Let's not talk about whether or not they're bandits. Speaking of Ingjuren and Lu Gongzan, I don't even know their background. They sound like people of Qing and don't understand the situation in Yu and Rong City. If the two of them come to Qingdu, My brothers might be suspicious of them. I always feel, it doesn't seem appropriate. As soon as he finished speaking, the little man on the table immediately frowned and pulled out a thin sword from somewhere. He held the sword and looked around. He saw the square seal behind him. The seal was the size of Zhou Xian's fist, but for the little man it was a big thing. The little man took 2 steps forward to the seal and swung the sword. The thin sword cut off a corner of the seal like it was cutting a piece of tofu. Then the little man turned his face and said angrily, "How can you refuse the good intentions of the gods? Have you not heard of the stories of ancient people who disrespected the gods and were punished because of it? The Wei River Lord was once suppressed by the demons of you and needed your help to punish them. Now you are making excuses. Do you want to become a subordinate of the demons and go against the Wei River Lord?" His tone was harsh and his face turned bright red. Zhou Xian was shocked and hurriedly said, I don't dare. I don't dare to think like that." The little man ignored him and continued to say angrily, "The Wei River Lord went to Sanluo Temple once because of your matter. He saw a woman and an old woman in Sanluo Temple. The woman muttered, 'De Lang,' and the old woman muttered, 'Tianliang add clothes, Tianliang add clothes.' Do you know them?" Zhao Xing froze and then tears fell. "They are my wife and mother. Where are they now? The heavenly priest said that the Dragon King is omnipotent. Can't he bring them back to life?" The little man was not moved by him. Instead he sneered, "I asked you what you want. You thought about it for a long time but only asked about your future. You didn't ask about your wife and mother. Why are you pretending now?" Zhao Xing sighed and stomped his feet. "When did I not want to? It's just that the dead can't come back to life. How could I ask the Dragon King for help?" The little man's expression softened. "The Dragon King told me that if you only ask about yourself and not them, then you are a heartless person and not worth helping. Now that I know you have your reasons, I won't pursue it for now. The Dragon King also told me that if you have any doubts, you can ask me to meet someone. Once you meet that person you won't have any worries. Now watch carefully." The little man took out a small token from his sleeve and threw it on the ground. He shouted, "Come out and meet me." As soon as he finished speaking, a green mist instantly rose from the ground. Then a woman's soul floated in the air. Zhao Xing took a closer look and found that it was his dead wife. After a few more words with the ghost, he was even more certain that there were some things that only the two of them knew. No one else could hear them. Zhao Xing asked his wife where they were with tears streaming down his face. The ghost replied, "They are in a place covered in white mist. I don't know where it is, but I think it is the underworld." However, the little man was only willing to ask them to say these few words. Not long after, the little man shouted, "It's time." He waved his hand and dismissed the ghost. Zhao Xing was heartbroken. He only asked the little man to ask him to talk to his wife a few more times. The little man said with a straight face, "Although Wei River Lord is very powerful, the Sanluo Temple has its own rules. Now you are an unrelated person. How can Wei River Lord ask Black Bai Yanjun to tell your wife and mother to return to the world of the living? When you do what Wei River Lord wants you to do, you will have the glory and wealth of the human world. You can also have your dead wife and mother. Now that you know these things, do you still have any worries?" Previously, Zhao Xing had suspected that it was some kind of demon's trick, using magic to create these things to trick him. But now that he saw his dead wife's soul, there were no more doubts in his heart. He was not a person without knowledge. He had heard his younger brother in Dingyi City say that demons and cultivators might have all kinds of magical powers, but the soul was the only thing that was difficult for them to control. After a person died, their soul could be destroyed, but it was very difficult to take it away because it was something that belonged to Black Bai Yanjun. If an unrelated person wanted the soul, it would anger the two emperors of the underworld. Now that he had seen his wife's soul with his own eyes and confirmed that it was really his dead wife, he knew that this Wei River Lord had great abilities. He was a true god. Thus he finally knelt on the ground and asked, "Divine official, tell me, what should I do now?" The little man said in a low voice, "First, send someone to invite Ing Juran and Lu Gongzan. After that, send some people to Hongling to find out the demon's movements and rescue the people trapped there. This will strengthen Rong City's reputation. After these two things are done, Dragon King has other orders for you in the future." Zhao Xing nodded and said, "But about the matter of Dragon King, I believe it, but I'm afraid that the people around me don't. Do you have any keepsakes or proof that I can show to others?" The little man laughed, That's not difficult. As he said this, he threw the small scroll in his hand to Zhou Xian. This is called the Ancient Scroll of Luoshu. Keep it with you. If you have any questions for the Dragon King in the future, write it on this scroll after taking a bath and burning incense. The Dragon King will see it. Zhou Xian hurriedly took it. Just as he was wondering how to write with such a small thing, the ancient scroll of Luoshu had already grown a bit bigger. It was now the size that a normal person could write. Suddenly he heard the little man shout in a low voice, "It's time. I'm going to report." Zhou Xian hurriedly said, "Divine official, please wait." He did not expect that this shout would wake him up. The cicadas outside the window had stopped chirping. It should be afternoon. The sunlight shone through the room. He was covered in sweat. It looked like he had slept. He slept in front of the desk as if he had fallen asleep while praying. Chapter 3:14. Zhou Xian was stunned for a while, feeling the tiredness of a nap. But he immediately jumped up from the ground and looked at the table. The square seal was missing a corner and the gap was smooth. A scroll lay on the table, glowing faintly in the sunlight. He grabbed the scroll and held it tightly in his hand, not knowing what to say. He stood there with his muscles tensed up for a while, then walked step by step to the door and pushed it open. He saw a green shrimp lying outside the door. The shrimp's tail was crushed and it looked dead. He stared at the prawn for a long time before he carefully picked it up and went back to the house to find a wooden box to put it in. After he was done, he put his hands together and prayed. His expression was sincere and focused. Now he believed. He believed in everything he dreamt of: the square seal with a missing corner, the scroll, and the little person whose leg he stepped on. There was indeed a God protecting him. And, if he did well, he could even see his wife and mother again. Even if they weren't his biological mother. This belief filled him with energy. At this time, almost everyone in Chengdu was in fear and sorrow. But Zhou Xian had become the most optimistic and the most determined person. Therefore, when Li Guang saw Zhou Xian for the second time, he was shocked by the expression on his face. Zhou Xian was standing in the courtyard of the detention room. It was already afternoon, and the old elm tree in the courtyard cast its shadow on the corpses of the demons. The corpses were huge, each of them the size of a calf. But their bodies were splashed with feces and blood, which made them stink. When Li Guang and the other 4 constables came to the detention room, they had to cover their noses. But now Zhou Xian stood in the courtyard. His expression was normal. He wore a coat revealing his chest. He stood next to the corpses with his hands behind his back, looking up at the sky as if he was thinking about something. But the expression on his face changed very quickly. Sometimes disappointed, sometimes angry, sometimes happy, and sometimes cold and serious. Li Guang stepped into the courtyard, looked at him, and was so shocked that his mouth opened slightly. After a while, he dared to call him in a low voice. "Brother." Hearing his voice, Zhou Xian slowly turned his head and looked at him calmly. After a while, he suddenly called out, "Prince Rong." Li Guang only dared to walk into the yard after hearing his words. She wiped the sweat on her neck with her sleeves as she gasped for breath. "What did Big Brother say?" "Call me Prince Rong." Zhou Xian did not move and looked at Li Guang sternly. "I've thought it through. When we attack, we must have a good reason. From today onwards, I will call myself Prince Rong. We don't need to clean up the emperor's side. We just need to get rid of that muddle-headed Emperor Yu and build a new country." Li Guang stopped in his tracks and frowned as he looked at Zhou Xian, who was basking in the afternoon sun. He had a bad feeling about this. It had only been 4 hours since he last spoke with Zhou Xian. However, his big brother Zhou Xian seemed to be getting more and more deranged. Zhou Xian smiled and tossed the scroll to Li Guang. "Take a look." Li Guang took it suspiciously. He first looked at Zhou Xian, then lowered his head and slowly opened the scroll. He couldn't help but widen his eyes. He discovered that the silk scroll was actually formed by a faint golden stream of light. As the silk scroll swayed, it trembled slightly as if it was floating on the surface of water. Li Guang stretched out his hand in shock and carefully touched the words. He felt that the scroll was surprisingly smooth. It didn't seem to be made of any material he knew. He raised his head and looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian said indifferently, "You should believe me now. Just now the Dragon King appeared in my dream again. This is the keepsake he left for me. Take a look at what's written on the scroll." Li Guang was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He blinked and lowered his head to look at the scroll. He quickly understood what was written. On the scroll was a map of Rong City and its surrounding areas. However, this map only outlined the general outline of Rong City and the Rong River that passed through the city. It wasn't very detailed. There were even more dazzling spots of light lit up in a few places on the map. Beside the spots of light, there were some words that seemed to be annotations. Li Guang was illiterate, so he couldn't understand what the words were saying. He raised his head and asked Zhou Xian, what does the map say? Zhou Xian walked with steady steps to Li Guang's side, took the scroll back and opened it. He pointed at the scroll with 2 fingers on his right hand and announced solemnly, "This is the Dragon King's treasure. There are 6 places marked on this scroll. There are 1,000 taels of gold in each place. This is the treasure that the Wei River Dragon King left behind in Rong City. Now that he knows that I am going to rise up, he gave it to me. Once we achieve great things, we will build temples in the country to worship the Dragon King to repay today's kindness. Do you believe me now?" Li Guang was stunned and thought to himself, there are 1,000 taels of gold in each place. There are 6 places in total. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6,000 taels of gold. 6,000 taels of gold. The enormity of the sum made his head spin. He didn't even know what 6,000 taels of gold meant. He was supposed to be Zhao Xing's assistant, so how could he know? Zhao Xing was very satisfied with his performance. He narrowed his eyes slightly and sighed. "Do you know how much tax Rong City, including Rong City and the surrounding villages and towns, paid last year?" Li Guang naturally didn't know. Zhao Xing smiled, "Just a little more than 50,000 taels of silver. Now that we have 6,000 taels of gold, 660,000 taels of silver, do you know how much we can accomplish?" "God is helping me." Zhao Xing sighed. "If I don't accomplish something great in this world, how can I be worthy of such a favorable time, place and people? The most important thing now is to call the 4 of them back. Tonight we will discuss how to get the 6,000 taels of gold. There are 2,000 taels of gold buried in the city, and another 4,000 taels of gold in Hongling. We will also discuss where to buy armor and horses with the money and where to recruit soldiers. Also, we need to go and welcome 2 people." When he said this, Li Guang finally came to his senses and interrupted him. "Brother, I am here to talk to you about this. The Tian brothers as well as Sun Tong and Zhou Ji have all run away." Zhao Xing was stunned and then he raised his eyebrows. "What did you say?" Li Guang sighed. "Yes. I just took care of things on my side and went to see how the 4 of them were doing. I was afraid that they would panic if they knew about the rebellion. At this time the city is in such a mess, so I really can't do anything good. I didn't know that when I went to find the Tian brothers, they were not in the north. Then I went to the west of the city to find Sun Tong, but I found the 4 of them together. When they saw me they said that Zhao Xing lost his mind because someone died in his family. We fooled him just now because we were afraid that he would get angry and kill people indiscriminately. That's why we agreed to help him. But now everyone knows that this is a big matter. How can the people of Rong City fight against the demons and the government? So they asked me to come with them to capture you and send you to the Chongfu camp. They said something about making up for their mistakes." Li Guang spat. "I am not that kind of person. I said that I would never do such a thing. I also said that your injuries are mostly healed. With your martial arts skills, the 4 of them can only go out lying down." The 4 cowards were scared. They looked at me for a while and then ran out of the city together. I couldn't stop them. I guess the 4 of them are probably going to the Chongfu camp." Zhao Xing was stunned for a while and suddenly sneered, "For cowards. I was wrong about them." He angrily paced a few steps in the courtyard and suddenly turned to look at Li Guang. He squinted his eyes and said, "Just watch. Today is a good time for them to be rich and powerful, but they don't want it. In the future when we become successful, they will regret it. Don't care about them. The Chongfu camp will know about this sooner or later. But if they want to do anything they will have to wait for more than a month. At that time, with the help of the Wei River Dragon King I will be successful," he said confidently, then walked to the demonic corpse and kicked it a few times. "Bastard, watch how I drive you all out of this kingdom." Li Guang opened his mouth and wanted to say something. But when he saw Zhao Xing's expression he didn't say anything. "That's why I said it has nothing to do with me." Li Yunxin shrugged innocently. He picked up a cup of warm tea and drank the fragrant almonds in his mouth. He looked at Wang Bojian and said, he wanted to rebel. He was now sitting in Munenju. The streets were full of people who ran out and walked around noisily. No one knew what they were talking about. But no one went into Munenju. Li Yunxin thought that the people who suffered from the disaster would come to see if there was anything to eat. According to Wang Bojian, this was because Munenju had a good reputation in Chengdu. They would give out porridge and money every new year. They had also sent people to set up relief points in other parts of the city. So no one came to the main restaurant to cause trouble. But Wang Bojian knew that Zhou Xian wanted to rebel. Li Yunxin was not surprised that he knew about this. If they knew nothing about what was happening in Chengdu, then they could really focus on the food and beverage industry. So when Li Yunxin sat down in Munenju, Wang Bojian served him a few dried fruits and a pot of tea. He suppressed his emotions and asked this Dragon King, why did he encourage Zhou Xian to rebel? Zhou Xian's rebellion was against the Emperor of Yu and the Sword Palace. But the Sword Palace was also Munenju's power. But he heard Li Yunxin's answer. He drank tea and ate dried fruits. He looked very relaxed and didn't seem to take the matter seriously. Wang Bojian scolded this Wei River Dragon King 100 times in his heart. But he still smiled and asked politely, but Zhou Xian said that Wei River Dragon King appeared in his dream. Could it be that the Dragon King is not you? Oh, you mean this? Li Yunxin held the teacup in his hand and turned it for a while. But his mind seemed to be elsewhere and thinking about other things. It was as if answering this question that Wang Bojian was very concerned about was just a casual chat to him. I originally planned to go to Hongling to see the situation. So I came here on the way to ask you some things. But I suddenly felt that Zhou Xian looked a little familiar, so I went to the yamen. Li Yunxin put down the teacup and slowly moved his hand through the fruit plate, trying to find a plump almond. Then I heard that he wanted to rebel. So I thought, I wanted to go to Hongling, but Hongling must be waiting for me. No matter how I disguise myself, people will recognize me at a glance if I go there from Chengdu. Don't you think so? He found the almond, threw it into his mouth and chewed slowly. So I thought if he really wanted to rebel, he would definitely go to Hongling and gather the strong young men there. That's why I said that a group of people went there in a big group. When they started to make a ruckus, it would be easier for me to hide my tracks. So that's the thing, he wanted to rebel anyway. What does it have to do with me? Wang Bojian was silent for a while. Then he took a deep breath and said with difficulty, so, Dragon King, you just wanted to go to Hongling so that someone can help you hide your whereabouts. And you provoke such a big thing? You don't have any other intentions? Li Yunxin smiled. I don't think so. Wang Bojian's face twitched for a while. Then he stood up and said, now I finally know why wherever the Dragon King goes, destruction follows. So, if I had another way to help Dragon King go to Hongling without being noticed, would Dragon King ignore Zhou Xian and ask me to immediately capture him? Li Yunxin raised his head and looked at him in surprise. Capture him? Wouldn't I lose face? I promised him that I would help him succeed. Wang Bojian finally couldn't suppress the emotions in his heart anymore. He frowned and said, Dragon King, you are too rash. If Zhou Xian really rebelled, he won't be able to do anything on his own. We don't need to worry about this. But with Dragon King helping him, if he really turns the Yu Kingdom upside down, it will mess up our arrangements. We don't want to see this result. This will cause us a lot of trouble. Li Yunxin thought for a while and looked at him. So I hope Dragon King won't act impulsively. Wang Bojian said seriously, this kind of rash behavior is not desirable. Our arrangements in the Yu Kingdom are interlocking. Once one part goes wrong, the whole situation needs to be adjusted comprehensively. I hope Dragon King can think of another way. But Li Yunxin suddenly laughed and stared at Wang Bojian. Old Wang, have you forgotten one thing? I'm not your subordinate or anyone in your organization. I'm Li Yunxin. I have my own plans for doing things and I don't need your consent. Whether you think it's appropriate or troublesome, it's not my consideration. I came from the city of Wei to Dongting and here, Li Yunxin tapped the table with his finger. Anyone who I think is rash will not end well. So before I talk to Zhou Xian, it might be a spur of the moment. But now I have finished talking with him and I have my own arrangements. If you mess with him now, you will also bring me trouble. Li Yunxin sighed. I hope you can adapt to this change as soon as possible. Now there is one more person in Rong City, and your family is no longer the only one. If you want to cooperate with me, you have to learn to respect me. Also, don't talk to me in this tone anymore. Otherwise, I will be unhappy. Chapter 3:15. Wang Bojian was speechless. It was not that he had no words to say, but it was the first time he heard someone voice out his opinion so rationally. For example, "Don't talk to me like that again or I will be unhappy." This sounded like something a child would say. An adult would at least know how to hide and suppress their emotions. However, he didn't feel any sense of acting unreasonable and shameless like a child. Although Li Yunxin looked like a child in a fit of pique, at least from Wang Bojian's point of view, he believed that Li Yunxin's threat was just a simple threat based on his years of experience in observing people's words and expressions. And the dangerous light in his eyes did not look like a child's at all. Therefore, he was slightly stunned and realized that he did not fully understand the person in front of him. He seemed to be more dangerous than he had imagined. Wang Bojian frowned and sighed. "I was too impatient and spoke without thinking. But Dragon King should be able to understand my feelings. But since Dragon King said this, Dragon King must have his own plans. Let's talk about this in a few days. But now the most important thing is..." At this point, Wang Bojian suddenly paused. Then he looked up at the sky as if he had sensed something in the sky. Li Yunxin's reaction was only a little slower than him. After Wang Bojian turned his head, a scroll in his arms started to jump wildly. He and Wang Bojian looked at each other. They both knew that Wang Bojian had obtained some information through their own channels. Therefore they stood up without saying anything. Wang Bojian walked to the back hall while Li Yunxin walked to the door. As soon as he walked out, he took out a talisman from his folding fan and turned to a small alley on the west side of Southern Wood Restaurant. There were some people on the street, but when they saw him, they only glanced at him and did not pay him any attention. When Li Yunxin walked into the shadow of the alley, he activated the talisman. An invisible force spread out in a small space. This was to cover his tracks and shield him from the surveillance of the nearby cultivators. Then he took out the scroll in his arms and saw a line of words on it. "Kun Wuzi and second cultivator are going to your place." Li Yunxin frowned. Before leaving Dongting, he left some magic figures for Lu Laodao. They are newly made with the spells of nature he learned from the translucent jade sheet. The distance between Dongting and Rong City is still too far for a virtual realm cultivator like Lu Laodao. Therefore, he uses this method to send messages. Once there is an emergency, he can cast the figure and write some simple words in Dongting, which can be seen on the picture scroll on his side. This kind of communication method was exceptionally troublesome in his time, but now it could be considered a divine ability of the immortals. Now he had received Lu Laodao's message. But what was going on? Kun Wuzi and 2 other cultivators are heading towards me? How did Kun Wuzi know that he was in Qingdu? Why did he leave the Cloud Mountain? Didn't they say that he would go to the stone chamber to reflect on his mistakes after the matter was settled? He stopped thinking about it and walked out of the alley. As soon as he took 2 steps, he saw Wang Bojian poking his head out of the big window of Nanju. Wang Bojian's face was gloomy. "Dragon King, people from Daotong are coming here." Li Yunxin shrugged. "I just knew it." Wang Bojian stared at him for a while. "There are 3 people in total. They are not far from here. We are still looking for their whereabouts. Are they here for Dragon King?" "I don't know," Li Yunxin said as he raised his head and squinted at the sky. "Don't look for them. They are above us." Before Wang Bojian could react, a breeze rises from the ground and goes up to the sky with a buzz. Li Yunxin, who stayed in the same place, walked into the door of Nanju. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, he turned into light spots and dissipated. Only then did Wang Bojian realize that Li Yunxin's real body had gone up with the breeze. The one left behind was just a shadow who didn't want to show his skills in the street. He looked up at the sky. In the azure blue sky, there were only a few palm-sized clouds. At this time, the sun was already showing signs of leaning to the west, so the edges of the clouds were plated with a faint golden color. Wang Bojian thought that Li Yunxin and the 3 guests were in one of the clouds. The clouds looked small, but in fact each one was several times the size of Qingdu. He stared at the sky for a while and sighed slightly in his heart. In fact, he really wanted to go up to the sky and have a look. But he couldn't be like Li Yunxin and soar up to the 9th heaven. That kind of feeling should be very pleasant. The three uninvited guests were indeed in the clouds. The soft clouds on the ground changed their appearance in the sky. They were huge and thick like a towering mountain hanging high in the blue sky. This mountain wasn't flat and undulating, but there were many small peaks and valleys formed by water vapor. The three people were in the clouds. A figure stopped in the valley formed by the fog, and his whole body was enveloped by golden light. This figure didn't seem to have a physical body, but something like a soul or a ghost. Looking at the outline, he vaguely looked like the sect leader of the Xianxia heavenly abode, Kun Wuxia. But if one looked closely, they couldn't see clearly because there was a golden light circulating around his body. And if one looked closely at the golden light, one would gradually realize that it was two golden figures, two men wearing tall hats and big sleeves. The figures of these two men were flat, as if they were people on a piece of paper. They revolved around Kun Wuxia's body and formed a golden light barrier, enveloping him inside. Kun Wuxia didn't seem to be in a good situation. His body was flickering as if it was about to dissipate. He floated straight in the air with his eyes closed as if he was trying hard to maintain his form so that it wouldn't dissipate. Logically, Kun Wuxia in this state should be very weak. But 100 meters away from him, the two pursuers in the misty mountain didn't move forward, as if they were deeply afraid of him. These two people didn't have any special characteristics. The two men seemed to be in their 30s. Their faces were ordinary and they had an ordinary beard. They were wearing a Taoist robe that didn't have a single wrinkle. One of them was holding a golden rui scepter, and the other was holding a small bell. When Kun Wuxia stopped, they also stopped and stared at him for a while. The one holding the rui scepter said, "You also know that you won't be able to hold on for long. You're a soul. The other body you possessed was already injured, and when you were expelled from that body by the sage, you were injured again. You were even heavily injured by me once on the misty mountain," the cultivator sighed. "If I were you, the most important thing I should do now is to think of how to dissipate my soul as soon as possible instead of running away. Otherwise, if you fall into our hands, you can't imagine the feeling." Kun Wuxia still didn't speak, as if he didn't have the energy to speak. His fingers fluttered in the golden light barrier, forming all kinds of hand seals. However, the figures of the two protectors that revolved around him became fainter and slower, as if they would dissipate at any time. The cultivator holding the bell frowned and said in a low voice, "He looks like he can't hold on anymore. Right now he's just stalling for time and bluffing. You use your rui scepter, I use my bell of primal chaos. Even if we have to destroy these two magic treasures, we have to take him down as soon as possible to prevent any accidents from happening. He has the Along the River during the Qingming festival in his hands, one of the Octave Treasure's ancient scrolls. Something unexpected happens and the sage blames us, you and I." The cultivator holding the rui scepter sneered. "Something unexpected happens? I'd like to see how he's going to do that. Colluding with demons. If I wasn't blessed by the heavens, I wouldn't be Pu Songzi now." What is this Pu Songzi? Enlightened Tao, enlightened master, and his realm isn't stable. I wonder what he does on normal days, ba. The words of the cultivator who called himself Pu Songzi were filled with resentment. He did not have the cold temperament that ordinary Daotong high-level cultivators usually had. Instead, he was more like a secular person. However, although he said that, his eyes were looking around as if he was guarding against an enemy that might suddenly attack. The cultivator holding the bell of primal chaos did not seem to dare to disobey him. He could only sigh and shake the bell in his hand. A clear and crisp sound spread out in all directions, as if he was investigating the situation around him. Sure enough, he found out what was going on. One breath later, the bell suddenly rang and a clear light shot out from the mouth of the bell, like a searchlight, directly below Cloudy Mountain. The cultivator's eyes widened and he shouted in a low voice, "There's really an ambush." He raised his voice again. "Who is it? Show yourself quickly." Pu Songzi still did not seem to care much just now. Now that he had encountered an enemy, he could not help but be wary. The rui scepter in his arms shook, and the clouds around him immediately rolled into a long dragon, surrounding the two of them. Then he calmed himself down and shouted sternly, "Who are you? Show yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, a person really did rush out from the clouds. This person's body was still surrounded by fog. The fog scattered in all directions like flowing water, finally revealing his true appearance. As for his true appearance, it was very similar to the two cultivators. It was the face of a middle-aged man in his 30s or 40s, with 5 strands of long beard on his face. He was wearing a green Taoist robe without any wrinkles, and there was a faint smile on his face. This person finally stopped between Kun Wuzi and the two cultivators, holding a horsetail whisk in his hand. He first stared at the two of them for a while, then turned to look at Kun Wuzi. Finally he raised his hand and bowed. The corners of his mouth were still slightly raised as he smiled. Junior brothers Pu Songzi and Huai Juzi, it's been a long time. When Pu Songzi and the Taoist holding the bell of primal chaos saw this person, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. This person, they were actually familiar with him. Daotong's Xianxia Heavenly Grotto Heaven's first seat of law, Dao Enlightened Master Yunzi. Pu Songzi and Huai Juzi looked at each other, then turned their heads and stared straight at Yunzi. Who are you? Yunzi was still smiling. But now the two cultivators had slowly discovered that his smile was evil. Even when he spoke, the curve of the corners of his mouth did not change at all. Chapter 316. It was as if his smile was carved on his face. Or, this person was a puppet. Pu Songzi and Huai Juzi both knew that this person was Yunzi, but they didn't know whether it was Yunzi. Because they were both cultivators of the Xianxia cave. Pu Songzi was a little more senior than Huai Juzi, and he and Yunzi could call each other brother. And Huai Juzi was a supervisor of the Law Institute of the Xianxia cave, and he was Yunzi's subordinate. The two of them knew Yunzi very well, including his appearance, habits and cultivation base. So they naturally knew that Yunzi was already dead. He died in the city of Wei near the Dongting Lake. But now there was such a Yunzi. Both of them were cultivators of the state of truth, and they had their own ways to distinguish whether what appeared in front of them was real or fake. But now this method didn't work on Yunzi. His body was half real and half fake, real and illusory. In layman's terms, this was an existence similar to a soul. Pu Songzi and Huai Juzi could think that this was Yunzi's soul. But the problem was that since Yunzi was already dead, even if there was something similar to Yunzi in the world, it should be a ghost. Because of this, they realized that this might be a brilliant camouflage. There was a powerful person nearby who made something similar to Yunzi's soul. And that powerful person was very likely the reason why Kun Wuzi forced himself to come here. So the two cultivators quickly moved their eyes away from Yunzi, and watched the situation around vigilantly. Huai Juzi said loudly, Taoist Yunzi is a high-level cultivator of the Xianxia cave in Daotong. Which powerful person is doing this? So disrespectful. Do you want to be the enemy of Daotong? Of course no one paid attention to him. But Yunzi, who was regarded as a puppet, still had that weird smile on his face and said, Why do you think I am a puppet? I know you. He raised his hand and pointed at Huai Juzi. Your grandfather was a tribal chief in the barbarian lands of the north. Your secular surname is Jin. Your secular surname is also Jin. Later on, your grandfather did some shady business, stole other people's merits, and became the ruler of a country, so he sent you to Yunshan to learn Tao. Let me think. I can still remember what you looked like when you were 20 or 30 years old. He could be said to have a big heart and a fat body. Now that you say it, hee. Yunzi grinned. You're actually a fat, stupid pig. In the secular world, you are also called Sanpang, so your fellow Taoists call you Sanpang. You didn't like it, so you came to my place and rolled on the ground, throwing a tantrum. You pushed your mouth into the mud and told people not to call you that anymore. I was also annoyed by your ugly appearance, so I gave you the Taoist name of Huai Juzi. At this point, you actually don't recognize me. When Huai Juzi heard this, his eyes widened and he cried out, What third fatty gene? This has never happened before. Then he turned pale. How do you know these things? Yunzi laughed. You stupid thing, do you think I don't know what kind of person you are just because you cover up people's mouths? Even now you're still a stupid yes man by his side. When have you ever improved? After saying this, he didn't look at him and turned to look at Pu Songzi. But he looked at him for a longer time. The smile on his face finally dissipated. After about 3 breaths, this Yunzi stretched out his hand and pointed at him. You're not Pu Songzi. When he looked at Pu Songzi was also looking at him. Now that he heard his words, he wasn't as surprised as Huai Juzi was. He only laughed coldly. Why am I not? Pu Songzi? In the vast sea of clouds, Yunzi narrowed his eyes and looked at him. Pu Songzi and I are from the same sect, and we call each other senior and junior brothers. What kind of relationship do you think we have? Let me tell you, he's my younger brother. Only Kun Wuzi and I know about this. When he saw me, he definitely wouldn't look like you now. Who are you? Pu Songzi and Huai Juzi looked at each other again and frowned. They originally thought this couldn't be Yunzi's godly soul, but now he actually said all these things, and they were all true. The two perfected masters didn't know how to do this. To control a perfected master's godly soul? Oh no. Yunzi's godly soul shouldn't have existed for a long time. At this moment, Kun Wuzi, who was behind Yunzi, suddenly said something. His voice was hoarse and it seemed weak in the high sky as if it was being blown away. But the three of them heard it clearly, because this was the first sentence that Kun Wuzi had said since he left the Cloud Mountain. They won't fall for your trick. After he said this, his hands that were forming seals suddenly stopped. So the golden protectors that were originally surrounding him paused for a moment, then both turned into flowing lights and returned to his palm. There was a picture scroll in his palm. But this picture scroll was very strange. Because it looked really too small. It was only the size of a palm. But this palm still counted the scrolls and paper on both sides. The real picture itself was only about the size of half a palm. Moreover, the drawing paper was not a regular shape, but an oblique triangle. It was as if the painter had casually torn a piece of paper, or simply made a few strokes on a piece of scrap paper to create this drawing, which was then worshipped by later generations as a treasure. Now, Pu Songzi and Huai Juzi's gazes were focused on that picture. This was the treasure that Kun Wuzi's godly soul brought out from Cloud Mountain, one of the 8 treasures ancient scrolls, along the river during the Qingming festival. Kun Wuzi flipped his hand and kept the picture scroll, and the treasure fused into his body. Because of this, his image became clearer and even his voice became more powerful. He then said the second sentence, I brought this out and since I met you I'll give it to you, you definitely want it. But you have to protect me and you have to make these two stay. His words turned out to be directed at Yunzi. But Huai Juzi frowned and asked Pu Songzi, what did he say? Who is he talking to? Pu Songzi's expression wasn't that good now. He finally straightened his face and looked around anxiously. He's here? He muttered in a low voice and at the same time retreated a distance. Why is he here? His behavior made Huai Juzi panic. At this moment this cultivator seemed to be the one who understood what was happening the most. He looked at Kun Wuzi, then at Pu Songzi, and heard the godly soul that was being chased by them say the last sentence. That Pu Songzi is indeed not Pu Songzi anymore. He's now possessed by the Freemasonry's quantum blessing. Huai Juzi is also a hidden chess piece hidden in the Cloud Mountain. Li Yunxin, why don't you show yourself? Chapter 317. Kun Wuzi said this name. This name was like a curse. Pu Songzi, or Fu Liangzi. Fu Liangzi's face changed instantly. He had been looking around in case someone was ambushing him. Now that he confirmed this from Kun Wuzi's mouth, he couldn't stay here anymore. He waved his sleeve and the rui in his hand immediately grew dozens of times, turning into a small jade boat. He waved his hand again and took Huai Jiezi, who was not far from him, over. He picked him up and stepped onto the jade boat. He made a gesture and was about to leave. One breath ago, these two people were still confronting Yunzi and Kun Wuzi. One breath later they wanted to escape after hearing the name. Huai Jiezi couldn't accept this like Fu Liangzi. Thus, at this moment Fu Liangzi activated his spell and wanted to escape immediately like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. However, Huai Juzi grabbed his hand and broke his spell. Senior Marshal Brother, what are you doing? Why are you leaving? Fu Liangzi's eyes widened. This is a trap. Kun Wuzi, that old monster, deliberately led us here. Li Yunxin is here, not in Dongting. Huai Jiezi frowned again. Li Yunxin? What about Li Yunxin? Fu Liangzi opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. But the next moment he closed his mouth tightly and decided not to waste any more time. He kicked Huai Jiezi down. Think about it yourself. Don't kill me. In the sky he naturally couldn't kick someone down. But Huai Jiezi was caught off guard and was kicked over a few times. The rui under Fu Liangzi emitted a burst of blue light and was about to escape. Then he finally heard Li Yunxin's voice. It was such a good thing, but you just had to make it so boring. An elegant young man in white suddenly broke through the thick clouds and flew into the sky. The clouds and mist on his body dispersed bit by bit. His fluttering clothes were plated with a layer of pale gold by the sun, making him look like a golden-armored immortal. Who else could it be but Li Yunxin? Fu Liangzi naturally recognized him. Without another word he flew away. But just as he was several feet away he heard Li Yunxin sneer. Run? The faster you run, the faster you die. Fu Liangzi was someone who had suffered at the hands of Li Yunxin. When he was in the city of Wei, Kun Wuzi, who was still alive, told him to be careful with Li Yunxin, but he didn't take it to heart. But now he understood that Kun Wuzi's words weren't false. He didn't dare to take Li Yunxin's words lightly. Thus, because of this sentence, he really stopped and turned his head to look back. Seeing Li Yunxin's body covered in golden light, his sleeves fluttering in the strong astral winds high up in the sky, he looked at him mockingly. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. I've been working in Qingdu for many days and I've set up a big formation to kill Zhenren. Coincidentally, just as the formation was set up, you came in. If you went 2 feet further away, your soul would have flown away and scattered. Do you believe me? In the past, Fu Liangzi would be a fool to believe him. A month ago, dozens of cultivators from Daotong's Langyi cave came, and they brought many heavenly materials and earthly treasures. They also used the souls of hundreds of thousands of people as the source of the formation to set up such a big formation. But now, Li Yunxin said that he used more than 10 days to set up a formation to kill Zhenren in Qingdu. It was a person. When Huaijuzi heard what he said, he didn't care about Fu Liangzi kicking him away. He looked at Li Yunxin carefully from head to toe and frowned. What kind of nonsense is this person talking about? Is a Zhenren someone you can easily kill? His soul will fly away and scatter. What a joke. Li Yunxin smiled coldly. You can try. Or you can ask this guy how he died. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed at Yunzi. Yunzi looked at him strangely. He clearly looked like a spirit with his own will and consciousness. But when Li Yunxin arrived, he was dumbfounded, as if he had become a puppet. Now that Li Yunxin raised his hand and pointed at him, it seemed like he had triggered some kind of command. The originally blank expression on his face suddenly became lively. He first frowned slightly and sighed, then shrugged and pointed at himself. I died because of stupidity. Li Yunxin smiled and nodded, then turned to look at Fu Liangzi and Huaijuzi. Therefore the two of them didn't look very good. At this juncture, everyone could see that Yunzi was Li Yunxin's puppet and was under his command. The 2 sentences that Yunzi said just now were also Li Yunxin's words. The two of them were not in the mood to appreciate Li Yunxin's sense of humor. They only felt that this guy was acting so unscrupulously in front of the 2 Zhenren. He simply didn't take them seriously and was extremely arrogant. However, Fu Liangzi gritted his teeth and slowly stepped back a little. He returned to Huaijuzi's side and said in a low voice, "Be careful." Huaijuzi's eyes widened in surprise. Be careful? You believe his crazy words? Fu Liangzi didn't bother to talk to him. He felt that this companion was extremely stupid, just like his former self. Because he had lived a peaceful life in Daotong for too long, he had become dull and arrogant. He just looked up at Li Yunxin. Do you know where Kun Wuzi escaped from? What did he do? Li Yunxin. In Dongting we acted on our own. You were good enough. I was defeated by you and I was convinced. But this time if you dare to intervene you are bound to be unlucky. But he ignored Huaijuzi and so did Li Yunxin. As if he didn't hear his words, he turned to look at Kun Wuzi. The smile on his face, whether it was sneer or mockery, was gone. He stared at the former head of the Dongtian seriously for a while and said, "What's going on? Don't tell me that you forgot what you promised me after you left Dongting, and then you made such a mess. Also, how did you know I was in Rong City?" Kun Wuzi's soul swayed gently in the strong wind as if it would disappear at any time. He grasped the along the river during the Qingming festival, one of the octave treasures in his hand, and said in a faint voice, I didn't intend to come to you. It was just a coincidence that I met you here. But since I met you I was not destined to die. Now my soul has no body and I can only rely on this octave treasures to survive. Previously I was chased by these 2 until now and my wakan is almost exhausted. If you save me I will tell you in detail. I can even give you this ancient scroll. But Li Yunxin frowned and interrupted him. What I want to ask you is that you promised me to explain everything to the two saints after returning to Yunshan and then go to the stone room to face the wall. Did you do it? Kun Wuzi was stunned. Well, I did, but how did I know? Li Yunxin turned around. Oh, I just want to know about it. Since you have fulfilled your promise, why can't I save you today? Chapter 318. His tone and behavior were extremely arrogant, as if he really had something to rely on. Fu Liangzi, who was disguised as Pu Songzi, was naturally afraid of Li Yunxin. He only stared at his movements to prevent him from suddenly launching an attack. Huai Juzi, who was beside him, was also a little suspicious at this time. Of course he had heard of Li Yunxin. Fu Liangzi had told him about him. But Fu Liangzi was always a person who cherished his reputation and honor. When he talked about Li Yunxin to Huai Juzi before, although he didn't deliberately belittle him, he didn't really boast that Li Yunxin was omnipotent and make himself look useless. He just told the truth so that he wouldn't lose face. Therefore Huai Juzi knew that Li Yunxin was a demon in the true realm. He had turned from a human to a demon. In fact, whether in Daotong or in the world of demons, people would have some prejudices. It was easy to look down on demons who followed the Tao or human practitioners who turned to demons. People who served two masters always didn't have a good reputation. Now Huai Juzi looked at Li Yunxin again. He was a demon in the true realm, so he should know how difficult it was to kill a Zhenren. But he still said such arrogant words and even moved closer with a face full of confidence, as if victory was really in his hands. He finally frowned and thought carefully. A demon in the true realm with the puppet Yunzi and a half-dead Kun Wuzi's divine soul. Could he really keep them here like he said? Just at this time he suddenly saw the expression on Li Yunxin's face disappear, and he raised his hand and sprinkled out a silver light. The five of them had been confronting each other in the sky for a long time, and the sun on the horizon had begun to incline to the west. Therefore the sunlight changed from the pale gold of the afternoon to a thick orange color. But now, when Li Yunxin raised his hand, the silver light radiating from his palm immediately forced back the golden light in the sky. When he looked carefully again, he found that a small round moon was born from his palm. As soon as it came out, it flew to a very high altitude and grew bigger and bigger. In just a breath's time, this small full moon had actually occupied half the sky. The sky that was originally dusk and the setting sun had suddenly turned into a night sky with a bright moon. Suddenly, the sound of stringed instruments came from the horizon. Strands of auspicious clouds emerged from the center of the big round moon. Amidst the clouds, a glittering golden palace gradually became clearer. It had hanging corners and flying eaves, golden pillars and jade tiles. It was a magnificent sight that had never been seen in the human world. Seeing this, Fu Liangliang's eyes widened and he exclaimed, "Fog Lock Toad Palace." This misty lock toad palace was a magic treasure personally made by the book saint. It was one of the top treasures of the Langya Grotto heaven. It was originally in the hands of Kun Wuzi, but it was split into two parts by him. One was called the Treasure Mirror of Profound Light, and it was given to Yunzi. After Yunzi died in the city of Wei, this treasure was taken by Li Yunxin. The other one was called Fog of Profound Light, and it was given to Fai Yunzi by Kun Wuzi, who was disguised as Fu Liangliang. Fu Liangliang was defeated by Li Yunxin in Dongting, and this Fog of Profound Light was also taken by him. In Dongting, Kun Wuzi was killed by Fu Liangliang. In order to protect his spirit, he couldn't care less. After his spirit was taken away by Li Yunxin with the judge's iron chain, he told him how to use the Fog Lock Toad Palace. He rarely trusted anyone in his life. At that time he was forced to believe in Li Yunxin, a monster who was famous for his craftiness. However, he didn't expect that he was right. The person who hurt him was his former disciple. This time he suffered another disaster because of his former cultivator. However, the person who saved him twice was still the monster Li Yunxin. It was really a joke of fate. Fu Liangliang had seen this Fog Lock Toad Palace in the school of the Emperor Star. Although he didn't know how powerful this thing was, once he knew that it was a treasure made by the master of calligrapher, he didn't dare to underestimate it. He spent a few words to explain the origin of this thing to Huai Jiezi. On the other side, the figures of Li Yunxin, Yu Yunzi, and Kun Wuzi were hidden in the auspicious clouds and disappeared into the bright moon. The two cultivators both knew that once the person in charge of the big tactical circle wanted to use the magic circle to kill the enemy, They had to retreat to the outside of the circle or go to the center of the circle. Therefore, when they saw Li Yunxin and the others had disappeared, they immediately drove their magic weapons and followed closely with Huai Jiezi, straight to the bright moon. However, they only moved forward for a short distance, and found that they had left the night sky and arrived in front of the Toad Palace in the moon. At this moment when they looked back, there were no clouds or Rong City. There was only the wilderness glowing with silver light in the dark sky. Fu Liangliang and Huai Jiezi were surprised and confused. Suddenly, they saw an elder turn around a huge red lacquer pillar under the corridor of the Toad Palace and walk to the white marble stairs. This elder had a square face and a wide mouth. He was tall and stout. He wore a large robe embroidered with 10,000 characters, and a belt inlaid with rubies was tied high around his waist. He walked to the stairs calmly, squinted at the two people and said, "Where did this arrogant kid come from? How dare you break into the fog-locked Toad Palace?" Fu Liangliang frowned and looked at him carefully. "Who are you?" The elder laughed. "Kid, you dare to break in without knowing who I am? If you ask me, listen carefully. I am the master of this Toad Palace, the Red Flame Toad. The Wei River Dragon King sent me here from Dongting to guard this place. If you want to break into the palace, you have to get through me first." Hearing the name Red Flame Toad, Huai Jiezi felt that this was a powerful big demon. However, he had never heard of any monster king in the true realm or the mysterious realm with this name. He frowned and asked Fu Liangliang in a low voice, "Who is this?" Fu Liangliang sneered, "Who is this? Some small demons in Dongting Lake can transform into human form and call themselves monster kings in Dongting. When Tan Liangliang ambushed Li Yunxin in Dongting, one of the small demons under his command was this Red Flame Toad. Unexpectedly, he didn't die and came here. He overestimated himself." After saying this, he waved his hand and threw out the jade rui. Although his words were full of contempt, he only used 20% of his strength to test the Toad King who guarded the Toad Palace. However, the Toad King didn't dodge. It blankly took the blow and was scattered with a buzz. When it was in Dongting, it was only a monster in the emptiness realm. How could it withstand the strength of a Taoist in the true realm? However, when Fu Liangliang was about to sneer, he found that the Toad King, which had been scattered and turned into light spots, gathered together again and laughed. "Do you know what the Toad Palace is? My moon Toad Palace hangs high in the sky. Every day, countless people look up at the moon. As long as one person looks at my Toad Palace, the power of incense and wish will extend my life by one breath. You are just two little Taoists. Can you kill all the plenilune cultivators in the world?" Chapter 319. So it's this thing. Fu Liangzi frowned slightly and said in a low voice. This blazing red toad seemed to be dead. Li Yunxin used some method to store his soul into this magic treasure and made it the array spirit that guarded the illusion. Based on the current situation, although this Zhou toad's cultivation level was low, he had the array to prolong his life. The two of them couldn't kill him for the time being. But it was just couldn't be killed. This thing was more like a smokescreen. If they swaggered in front of this Zhou toad, he couldn't do anything to the two cultivators. But was this the true use of the magic treasure Misty Toad Palace, made by the master of calligrapher? To create an unkillable array spirit in the illusion. What was it used for? There should be some other mechanism. Fu Liangzi gritted his teeth. He didn't care about the Toad King's mockery. Instead, he took a step back and shook his head at Huai Jiezi. "Be careful." Huai Jiezi looked at him and sighed. "I think you've already entered the absurd state. Look at yourself." He took a step back and looked at Fu Liangzi up and down. "Previously, when you heard that Li Yunxin was coming, you fled in panic and didn't even care about your demeanor. Now you've met this little demon with low cultivation level. Instead of advancing, you retreated. Think about it. What kind of you were in the past and what kind of you are now? Has that Li Yunxin already become your inner demon?" Fu Liangzi frowned. "Don't talk to me with such an attitude. Entering the absurd state, inner demon? This kind of thing only the five of you elders would be able to do it. I'm Fu Liangzi. I'm the ninth one. You don't have the right to lecture me about the cultivation of our sect." Although Huai Jiezi's tone wasn't good, he had good intentions. He wanted to wake him up. Unexpectedly, not only did this Fu Liangzi not appreciate it, he even lectured him. Both of them were cultivators in the true state. Logically speaking, a perfected one should have been furious after being insulted like this. But Huai just stared at him and did not refute him. It seemed that what Fu Liangzi said was the hard truth, and this Taoist priest whom he called Pai Liangzi had no room to refute. But he wasn't in a good mood to talk, so he vented his anger elsewhere. He looked to his left and right, and his old hatred for being kicked off the Rui by Fu Liang finally welled up in his heart. He raised his hand and used his knuckles to knock on the bell in his hand. "Break for me." They didn't see the bell ring, but the scene in front of them immediately faded like the tide following his words. The Toad King, Toad Palace and the moonlight faded. The wilderness further away and the dark sky also faded, revealing the face behind. And after that, there was nothing. Half of the sky was dyed red by the sunset glow, and a large mass of gold-plated clouds. This scene was very familiar, as if it was the sky before they had entered the illusion. However, the misty Lock Toad Palace was a magic treasure made by the sage of calligrapher. How could it be broken by a true state cultivator striking the bell? Fu Liangzi couldn't care less about Huai, who was acting blindly without thinking, and focused his attention to observe carefully. Just now in the Toad Palace he easily knew that it wasn't the real world, but an illusion. Now that he was in such a scene, he looked again. After a full quarter of an hour he still couldn't find any loopholes. This second illusion was actually terrifyingly real. He turned his head and glared at Huai. "Do you know now? Let's see how you can escape." Huai didn't speak but frowned. He also looked for a full quarter of an hour. But just like Fu Liangzi, he found nothing. This second illusion was impeccably real. At this time he finally realized that something was wrong. Just like what Fu Liangzi had said, he didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. At this moment, Li Yunxin and Kuan Wuzi were in the clouds and mist. He waved his hand and recalled the puppet Yunzi beside him. He frowned and looked at the flickering divine soul opposite him. "I don't know how long I can trap them, but you better make a long story short. What happened? Why did you come here? If not for me, who else are you looking for?" Kuan Wuzi had just received a breath of spiritual energy from Li Yunxin. At this moment his expression relaxed a little. He looked down at his feet. Chengdu could be seen from here. Such a city was like a child's toy, placed crookedly in a small basin among the mountains. Then this former leader of the heavenly grotto said, "Haven't you already set up here for several days? Why can't you trap them? If you let them escape today, Fu Liangzi is right. It will be a big disaster for you." "What the hell did I set up?" Li Yunxin frowned. "I just wanted to do something here and you lured these two things here. Where did I get the time to set up a trap? I was just scaring them. Look at you, were you ambushed on the way back to Cloud Mountain?" Kuan Wuzi was stunned. "Then why are you still talking here? Take me away from here to the southwest first, I'll tell you in detail on the way." Li Yunxin laughed. "I think it's better to talk here. You see, I'm a demon of the true realm and I can't deal with two human cultivators of the true realm. If they escape later, I can only make a feint and make you stay here to stall for time, then I'll take my time to come up with a long-term plan. So, the current situation is, tell me what I want to know first, then I'll consider whether to take you away or not." Kuan Wuzi widened his eyes. "You're telling me this? Look at me now." He became crazy for no reason. He even grabbed his hair bun with his right hand and fiercely pulled it as if he wanted to pull it out. However, his current appearance was that of a divine soul, so there was no need to pull his hair. Such a fierce pull actually made his head elongate, making his facial features look twisted and comical. He didn't have any demeanor of the former leader of the Langia Heavenly Grotto. "Look at me now. With my current appearance, my Tao heart is long gone. My cultivation is also ruined. What can I lie to you about?" he shouted at Li Yunxin. At the same time he waved his hand and threw the along the river during the Qingming festival to him. "I'll give this to you now. Do you believe me now?" Li Yunxin reached out and caught the ancient scroll steadily. Without looking at it, he put it into his fan. Then he sighed. "Yes. I also feel sorry to see you like this. But in case I become as pitiful as you still have to tell me what happened." Kuan Wuzi froze for a while, then he gritted his teeth and laughed. Good. You have a heart of iron." Li Yunxin, guess why I didn't want to tell you what happened before? Do you still remember when I saw you at the Dongting how you got the illuminating jade slip from the hands of the Lord Dongting, And how you made me give up the idea of taking that thing away. You said it was the secret of the two sages. If I knew that secret, I would definitely not have a good ending. But no. Hey, my Tao heart and cultivation are gone, but I even have some secular feelings in my heart. I appreciate that you saved my life twice, so I don't want to drag you into big trouble. But since you must listen to me, don't blame me. Chapter 320. Li Yunxin is slightly stunned because of his words. He doesn't expect that Kun Wuzi will fall into such a situation. He also doesn't expect that Kun Wuzi will thank him for saving him twice. However, at this moment, Kun Wuzi's soul has come close to his ear. This Taoist who used to be in the Tao Insight realm is holding back a crazy energy at this moment. He doesn't care that Li Yunxin may wave his hand and break him up by instinct. He doesn't breathe. He only has a shadow-like body. The cold aura of this body sent chills down Li Yunxin's hair. Then he said in an equally cold voice, "I'll tell you now. Not only have I returned to the Yunshan orthodoxy, I've also met the sage." As he says, he slowly hovers around Li Yunxin. He looks at Li Yunxin with one eye and looks around with the other eye. It seems that he is afraid that someone will suddenly rush out. His funny and weird look reminds Li Yunxin of Yunzi. When he first met Kun Wuzi, Yunzi was already a remnant soul. It was the peak state where he was about to lose his mind. Now Kun Wuzi also ends up like this. It can be seen that what he is about to say has shocked and frightened him so much that he can't keep his mind clear when he mentions this matter. I also told the sage what happened in Dongting. Hey. Kun Wuzi's eyes widen. But do you know? He suddenly stops, grins and roars, "Daotong only exists in name now." Li Yunxin frowns. "What do you mean?" As he says this, he raises his hand and writes several magic figures in the void, protecting the two of them firmly. According to his experience, Kun Wuzi is long-winded and hesitant. Maybe when he is about to tell the truth, he will suddenly be interrupted, killed or taken away by someone. He used to hate this kind of situation. How can he not be on guard at this moment? Fortunately, what he worries about doesn't happen. When he asks that question, Kun Wuzi doesn't even hesitate. He stares at his eyes and says a few words. "The saint is dead." Li Yunxin was stunned. Dead? What kind of death? At this moment, Kun Wuzi didn't care about his question. He seemed to have sunk into a state of madness and was unable to extricate himself. He danced with joy and shouted, "Now the world is really filled with jackals and wolves, and rotten wood is the official." What did Daotong look like after tens of thousands of years? The sage is dead and the righteous path in this world no longer exists. Then he squinted at Li Yunxin. What kind of death? A saint hasn't ascended for 2,000 years. What kind of death could there be? You mean? Li Yunxin's heart was beating wildly. He deliberated over his words, afraid that Kun Wuzi would misunderstand and give him the wrong information. You're saying that the two sages haven't ascended for a long time, so their corporeal bodies have reached the end of their lifespan. Their corporeal bodies have collapsed and died and their divine souls no longer exist? Kun Wuzi sneered. Otherwise, why would I end up like this? Today Daotong has long been occupied by a group of people. It's funny that I was one of them in the past. When I went back to Daotong to talk about the Freemasonry, do you know what the holy masters of the other caves said? They said that this matter involves a lot of people. Once they investigate it, it will be a disaster that hasn't happened in Daotong for thousands of years. They must not act recklessly. Those idiots are rotten to the core. Li Yunxin frowned. But just now you said that you met the saint of calligraphy. Why did you say that he is dead? Don't tell me you've never seen them in the past few hundred years? The two sages are asking people to find the Jade Scroll of Enlightenment. If the two sages are dead, how can they ask people to find the Jade Scroll? Before Lu Ling went down the mountain, he also said that he met the two sages and obtained many magic treasures. Could it be that he didn't die at that time? The more he said, the more he felt that this Kun Wuzi was crazy. His words could no longer be trusted. Now that he threw out so many questions, Kun Wuzi just looked at him and sneered. You can think about these things slowly. I only want to ask you, what are your plans now? You are a demon. You know that the saints are dead. How can Daotong sit back and watch you spread this news? Li Yunxin turned around and looked at the clouds. This was indeed a big news. He had to prove it or disprove it. However, he couldn't just listen to Kun Wuzi's side of the story. What a joke. The death of two supreme martial artists in the world. He wouldn't believe it just because of the words of a half-mad divine soul. It would be best if he could capture Fu Liangzi and the person beside him. Perhaps the two sane people would be able to give him more accurate information. He thought for a while and looked at Kun Wuzi again. I will save you. Then tell me where you were going and who you were going to find. Kun Wuzi immediately pointed to the southeast. Send me to the capital of Yu country, to the sword palace of Yu country. I want to find the palace master of the sword palace. Li Yunxin heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Good, this was really a good thing. Previously he wanted to know why the people of Daotong didn't care about what Yang Jianzi had done in Yu country. Now they sent Kun Wuzi, who seemed to have a deep relationship with the palace master. He smiled. You want to see Yang Jianzi? You don't need to go to the capital. He is here. But unfortunately, he is a member of the Freemasonry now. Don't you know? Kun Wuzi blinked. What nonsense are you talking about? At this time Fu Liangzi and Huai Jiezi had stayed in the second illusion for half an hour. They still couldn't break the formation. There was not a single flaw. They saw the sun slowly tilting to the west. They could also see the sunset, ravens and even the specks of dust in Qingdu. Fu Liangzi used the Jade Rui and Huai Jiezi used the Bell of Chaos. They had already used all kinds of methods and divine abilities in the void, but the thin spiritual power that made up this illusion didn't even ripple. Until they saw a third person appear. This person came from the west. His back was against the sun, so his face was dark. But even so they could see that he was glowing slightly. It was as if this person was made of gold, and his skin shone with a metallic luster. The newcomer stopped about 100 steps away from the two cultivators and looked at them first. Fu Liangzi and Huai Jiezi also looked at him with great vigilance. Then this person said, I have been observing the two of you for a while, so I don't understand. Why are you using your divine abilities non-stop? Fu Liangzi frowned and said in a deep voice, This formation spirit has finally come out. This illusion is easy to break. But his words were heard by the newcomer. That person was slightly stunned and said calmly, I's Taoist name is Yang Jianzi. I am a friend of the Freemasonry cultivators. This is Yu country's Qingdu. What illusion are you talking about? Chapter 321. Fu Liangzi laughed coldly. Such tricks, it's... But before he could finish his sentence, the person opposite him raised his hand and tossed something over. Fu Liangzi and Huai Jiezi were both true state cultivators, so they naturally had good eyesight. Thus, even though the little thing was only the size of a fingernail, they could see it clearly. It seemed to be a nail. The two first suspected that it was some kind of hidden weapon or magic weapon. But soon, they saw the appearance of the nail clearly. The vigilance and doubt on their faces disappeared, and they immediately raised their hands to catch the nail firmly. Looking at Yang Jianzi, he asked, Where did you get this thing? There's an emissary from your association at the Red Ridge. Yang Jianzi said calmly, That emissary said that the two of you would know that it's one of us when you see this nail. Now it seems that he wasn't lying. But what's the mystery behind this nail? Which emissary? What's his name? Fu Liangzi was still frowning and asked again. The emissary calls himself Xiao Yaozi. Yang Jianzi said this and realized that the two cultivators opposite him were slightly stunned at first and then looked at each other. Then Fu Liangzi took a deep breath and smiled. So it's that person. Oh, we're indeed familiar with each other. As for the mystery behind this nail. He lowered his head and looked at the nail carefully. Huai Jiezi was also looking at it. Because of this small thing, the two seemed to have fallen into a brief memory. It was as if they were lamenting a certain period of time in the past, and also as if they were regretting something. But in the end they quickly broke away from that state of absent-mindedness, and threw the nail back to Yang Jianzi. Have you seen any other nails in this world that have patterns? This one there is. The mystery lies in this pattern. This for you. A quarter of an hour ago Fu Liangzi was extremely anxious, and felt that he had fallen into an unbreakable perfect illusion set up by Li Yunxin. But now, after being exposed by Yang Jianzi, he realized that the two of them had become a big joke. How could there be a formation that could kill a perfected one? That was just another one of that crafty Li Yunxin's diversionary tactics. Previously he was plotted against because he didn't care about Li Yunxin. This time he was plotted against because he cared too much about Li Yunxin. Moreover, he was plotted against in such a low-level and ridiculous way. His heart was already filled with raging hatred and humiliation. But how could he show those emotions on his face? Especially in the face of such a self-proclaimed friend of the Freemasons. He knew what a friend of the Masons was. Thus, he gritted his teeth slightly to suppress the turbid air that was welling up in his throat. He continued, "As for you, what is your current identity? What's his cultivation?" As he said this, he unconsciously raised his face and narrowed his eyes. If Li Yunxin saw this expression, he would know that this meant that Yang Jianzi was placing himself on a higher level, like a senior asking a junior something. However, Yang Jianzi did not seem to care about this. He calmly bowed and answered, "I is now a perfected one who has attained the Tao, the former master of the Sword Palace of Yu country. Master Xiaoyaozi has been inspecting I for more than 5 years. Now he said that as long as I accomplish something big and pass the inspection, I can become a guest of the Freemasons." Fu Liangzi smiled, "Guest. So you do have some skills. Although the status of a guest of the Freemasons can't be compared to us, the disciples of the elders, it's still, well, not bad." Then he narrowed his eyes and looked at Yang Jianzi again. "So what big thing do you want to accomplish?" Yang Jianzi smiled. This was the first time Fu Liangzi saw this person smile. But when this smile appeared on his metallic face, it made him seem even colder. "It's to capture Li Yunxin," he said. "Master Xiaoyaozi previously calculated the whereabouts of your 2 disciples, so he asked me to come and assist you. When I came, I seem to have found traces of Li Yunxin. He's not far from here. Then I saw the 2 of you casting spells on the void. Because I didn't know what kind of supernatural power you 2 were casting, I watched for a while." Fu Liangzi's face alternated between white and green. He loudly interrupted Yang Jianzi, "Since you sense Li Yunxin, why didn't you stop him? Now that he's escaped, you're blaming us? That Li Yunxin was bluffing just now. We were just acting cautiously. What are you afraid of?" And fellow Taoist. Yang Jianzi waited for him to finish his storm-like reprimand before saying slowly, "But that Li Yunxin didn't escape." While looking at the stunned Fu Liangzi and Huai Jiezi, he stretched out his hand and pointed to the side. "Isn't he in that cloud? The 2 of you didn't know about it?" Fu Liangzi blankly turned his head to look. When Li Yunxin appeared previously, the few of them were confronting each other in the cloud. But the clouds in the sky could also move. Now, that huge mountain-like cloud had already moved a considerable distance and was thousands of meters away from the 3 of them. The clouds were dyed orange-yellow by the setting sun, as if the sky was a mountain carved out of a huge topaz. Just as Fu Liangzi turned his head in a daze, he finally heard the voice that made him gnash his teeth in hatred, wishing he could skin Li Yunxin and eat his flesh. "You see, the Yang Jianzi you're looking for is here." Li Yunxin really came out from that mountain of clouds. He led Kuan Wuzi, who was beside him, and flew several hundred meters forward. When he could see clearly, he pointed at Yang Jianzi, then turned his head to look at Kuan Wuzi. "Like I said, this person has already joined the Freemasons. If you go looking for him, won't you be walking into a tiger's den?" Fu Liangzi suddenly widened his eyes and roared furiously, "Li Yunxin, you dare to make fun of me? A scholar prefers death to humiliation." But Li Yunxin ignored this scholar. Kuan Wuzi also looked at Yang Jianzi, stunned for a long while, unable to speak. Li Yunxin, on the other hand, smiled faintly and moved forward again. He looked straight at the former Sword Palace Lord, who was glistening in the setting sun, and nodded. "You've only been in Qingdu for 2 days, but your name has already spread like thunder." Yang Jianzi looked at him calmly. Before Dragon King came to Qingdu, his name had already spread here. "I can't compare myself to Dragon King." Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then tilted his head and looked at him. "You're an interesting person. I've heard some things about you. If you weren't on the wrong side, you'd be a good friend. But now, Palace Lord has his own business. Why did you join the Freemasons?" Yang Jianzi smiled. Dragon King was originally a person who lived a carefree life, but didn't he also join the demons? This world is full of changes and we just have to go with the flow. Now that the situation has come to this, Dragon King, I have a presumptuous request. Chapter 322. Li Yunxin thought for a while. "Speak. Please leave for today, Dragon King." Yang Jianzi stopped smiling and looked at Li Yunxin seriously. These two beside me are outstanding disciples of the Freemasonry. Today I am not prepared, they are not prepared, and Dragon King does not seem to be prepared either. Therefore, if we really fight, Fu Liangzi was stunned at first, then reacted. He raised his eyebrows and shouted in a low voice, "How dare you be so cowardly?" But Yang Jianzi continued, "If we really fight, once these two outstanding disciples are injured or killed, it will be hard for me to explain to the Freemasonry emissary, just like how Dragon King is eager to make contributions at the Wei River to please the Dragon God, I also have people I want to please." Fu Liangzi was furious. "You arrogant wild Taoist. You are merely at the true state and you practice unorthodox martial arts. You must be a demon and now you want to pretend to be an expert in front of us." He was first deceived and humiliated by Li Yunxin, and he was already suppressing his anger. Then Yang Jianzi saw how stupid he was. But Yang Jianzi looked calm and steady, which was a world of difference from his current appearance. Therefore he had developed a subtle jealousy towards this friend of the Freemasonry, which he was not willing to admit. Now he realized that not only did Li Yunxin look down on him, even Yang Jianzi looked down on him. He could no longer endure it. Fu Liangzi clenched his teeth, at least he could no longer endure it with Fu Liangzi. Therefore he suddenly turned around and glared at Yang Jianzi fiercely. "Today I will show you." But Yang Jianzi did not even look at him, he only stretched out a hand. It was a pale gold hand with 5 slender fingers held together. This hand was like a sharp sword, pointing straight at Fu Liangzi's chest. They were 100 meters apart. Then before Fu Liangzi could say, "You dare to attack me," a cloud of fog suddenly exploded in front of Yang Jianzi. It was as if someone had cracked a whip. A crisp paw sound rang out, echoing far away in the empty sky. And all this happened in a breath's time. Yang Jianzi quickly retracted his hand and continued speaking to Li Yunxin. "Then Dragon King should know that I am not afraid of fighting. It is just that an opponent like Dragon King is hard to find. This is like an old man seeing a rare delicacy. He would not be willing to swallow it, but he must savor it and find the beauty within. That's why I hope to have a fair fight with the Dragon King. That's the real joy of life," said Gu Shenwei. But Li Yunxin did not answer him immediately. Li Yunxin turned to look at Liangzi. Just 2 breaths ago this fortune quantum master was still fuming with rage. He looked like he was about to brandish the jade rui in his hand and rush over to teach Yang Jianzi, this foreign chamberlain, who did not know the rules, a lesson. Yang Li Liangzi long, but he Li Ling Li and Li Liangzi, and as if he, because his magic treasure was broken. From the middle it was cut into 2 pieces in his hand. The cut was as smooth as a mirror and could reflect a person's face. Even the strictest noblewoman would not be able to find the slightest irregularity. But this was a magic treasure. How could a magic treasure be fragile and easily broken? Moreover, this magic treasure seemed to have been sliced apart by Yang Jianzi just now. He had used his palm and the power of his body to unleash an incomparably swift and fierce palm wind, or to be more accurate, sword qi, which had sliced apart the Rui scepter. However, it had not harmed Fu Liangzi at all. This was a terrifying declaration of power. This declaration made Li Liangzi shut his mouth and stared at Yang Jianzi with wide eyes. He knew how unbelievable it was that the magic treasure, could be cut in half with a casual wave of a hand. But he also knew that Yang Jianzi said he was a perfected person. How could a perfected person have such ability? After being stunned for a while, he gritted his teeth. "You dare destroy my magic treasure." But everyone could hear the fear in his voice and words. Li Yunxin withdrew his gaze from the magic treasure. He looked at Yang Jianzi and restrained the expression on his face. "Good. I know, you are not a coward." Yang Jianzi smiled. "Then thank you, Dragon King." Then he looked at Li Liangzi. He looked at him silently for a while until Li Liangzi slowly calmed down and raised his eyebrows vigilantly. Then he said, "Fellow Taoist, whether I am a demon or a human cultivator, you can say whatever you like. Fellow Taoist, you can also think about whether I's cultivation is high or low. But there is one thing." He paused as if he deliberately emphasized his tone, and indeed used an even deeper and more powerful voice to say, "The method that I practice is definitely not a heretical one. It is a profound orthodox method passed down by the Deva. Fellow Taoist, don't be wrong about this." Li Liangzi stared at him gloomily. After a while he looked at Li Yunxin. He seemed to be weighing the possibility of Li Yunxin taking advantage of the situation if he rushed over and fought with Yang Jianzi. In the end, he didn't say anything, nor did he do anything. Instead, the hatred on his face disappeared and he sneered. Good. Today you are very impressive and imposing. He pointed at Yang Jianzi. Watch how I will reason with Xiao Yaozi when I meet him. Yang Jianzi smiled. At that time, fellow Taoists can speak the truth. Li Liangzi nodded. Good. Remember, let's go. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to leave this place with Huai Juzi, who had been silent all this time. But then Kun Wuzi's soul next to Li Yunxin shouted in a low voice, Li Yunxin, keep them here. Seeing that Li Liangzi was about to leave, Kun Wuzi suddenly rushed out from behind Li Yunxin, and turned into a flickering human figure. He pointed at Fu Liangzi and Huai Juzi and shouted, Why are you talking about a gentleman's promise with them? These despicable people, they promised you and now they're here to harm you. He walked forward a little and stared at Yang Jianzi. Gritting his teeth, he squeezed out words from his throat. The world is going to be in chaos and the saint is dead. The world is going to die in the hands of the Freemasons. Do you know that? But Yang Jianzi looked at him emotionlessly and didn't say anything. He originally looked like he was made of metal, but now he looked more like a statue. He didn't seem to care about Kun Wuzi's words, and didn't even know what he was saying or doing. Kun Wuzi seemed to be even more anxious, and opened his mouth as if he was about to shout. But at this time, Li Yunxin waved his hand, and a golden light pulled him back into the clouds. However, he was still a little too late. Kun Wuzi still managed to blurt out a sentence. You don't remember the Sword Saint's past. The expressions of Yang Jianzi, Fu Liangzi, and Huai Juzi changed at the same time because of these words. Chapter 323. Fu Liangfang first looked at Kun Wuzi, then turned to stare at Yang Jianzi. What did he say? Ever since Yang Jianzi appeared in front of everyone, he had always been calm and steady. That was until Kun Wuzi said this. Yang Jianzi was stunned for a moment, then his face and the other parts of his body that were not covered by his robe suddenly turned bright red. It was as if metal had been heated up in an instant, and the source of the heat came from his body. His clothes also began to emit green smoke, then turned black in an instant and turned into powder in the strong wind. Sword Saint! He roared. Red light and sparks floated out of his mouth, as if there was a smelting factory hidden in his body, and at this moment, it was rumbling and pouring out heat. You dare to mention him in front of me? After listening to his angry words, Fu Liangzi's expression suddenly became disappointed. It seemed that after listening to Kun Wuzi's words, he felt that Yang Jianzi might be related to the Kenzo, so he felt that he could make some trouble or see through his trick. But at this moment, looking at Yang Jianzi's expression, he realized that things did not seem to be as he thought. It was more old-fashioned. It was probably some drama about how Daotong and Kenzo had betrayed him. This kind of thing happened all the time in the world. At least for now, he was not in the mood to listen to Yang Jianzi's grievances. Maybe in the future. But Yang Jianzi's anger did not subside. Originally, his clothes had been burned and his body was naked. However, there was a layer of golden light protecting his body, and no indecent parts were exposed. But then Yang Jianzi took a step forward in the void. He seemed to be filled with anger. Then he stepped out of the golden light, which faded away like wisps of smoke, and his torso was visible. His body, like his face, was the color of metal. But the skin on his neck was smooth while his body was not like this. His body seemed to have gone through terrible torture and was covered with crisscrossing scars. Those scars were thick or thin, long or short, like the bark of an old tree. But the most eye-catching thing was the terrible scar in the middle of his body. Even though it had already healed, it was still a knuckle deep. This huge scar was 3 fingers wide and extended from between his collarbones to the bottom of his lower abdomen. How terrible it must have been when this scar had not yet healed. See these. Yang Jianzi glared angrily at Li Yunxin and Kun Wuzi. 8,000 years ago he left these things on me, and even crippled half of my cultivation. Then I cultivated bitterly with this broken body and finally returned to the true state. But do you know what my Tao heart is now in this true realm? My Tao heart is to see that Sword Saint again. Yang Jianzi gnashed his teeth. If I see him again. He looked so angry that he couldn't say anything else. Fu Liangzi sneered. Kun Wuzi stood blankly beside Li Yunxin and didn't know what to say. Li Yunxin finally drew several talismans around his body and sealed the soul of this profound state cultivator so that he wouldn't talk nonsense again. Then he turned to look at Kun Wuzi and sighed. I don't think this is a Tao heart, friend. It's a delusion, obsession, and inner demon. You and I are both demons now, but we were once humans. You should know the difference between a Tao heart, obsession, and inner demon. Li Yunxin spread his hands. You are indeed a complete demon now. You think you have a Tao heart, but in fact it's long gone. People with a Tao heart won't be like us. The few people here don't have a true Tao heart. Li Yunxin pointed at Fu Liangzi and Huai Juezi. These two say that they are dual cultivators. They practice both Dao Tong and Kenzo techniques. But they don't have a Tao heart either. You used to stay in Kenzo, don't you think it's strange? Why is it that the cultivation of Taoists and swordsmen is so difficult, and they need to clear so many emotions, but they don't need to, and demons don't need to? They say it's for the supreme oblivion. Li Yunxin looked at Yang Jianzi. But do you know the true meaning of this phrase? Fu Liangzi was looked down upon by Li Yunxin. He glared at him fiercely but didn't dare to do anything else. But he could talk. To Fu Liangzi, how old was this Li Yunxin? Maybe he was talented, strong, and lucky and could gain great power in a short period of time. But knowledge wasn't something that talent and luck could make up for. Qing Liangzi once said that the Freemasons had a dual cultivation technique. Fu Liangzi naturally had it too. Not only did he have it, but he had also studied it for many, many years. Even a fraction of this many years was probably older than Li Yunxin's age. Hearing him belittle himself and comment on the phrase, supreme oblivion, so arrogantly, Fu Liangzi glared at him and sneered. You're just a 16-year-old kid. Even if you learned Taoism in your mother's womb, it's only been 16 years. And you have the guts to talk about supreme oblivion? Unfortunately, Li Yunxin ignored him again and only looked at Yang Jianzi. Yang Jianzi frowned slightly, the anger in his eyes still hadn't dissipated. He didn't seem to think that Li Yunxin would have any wise opinions about this question. But he knew that Yang Jianzi wouldn't suddenly run over to sit and discuss Taoism with him. He must have some other purpose. So he gritted his teeth. When I was learning Taoism, I naturally learned about oblivion. What do you have to say? Li Yunxin sighed slightly. The supreme oblivion Ido comes from a scripture called Tao Scripture. But before saying this, have you ever heard of heaven and earth are heartless and treat all living things as straw dogs? But he didn't expect Yang Jianzi to answer. He continued, heaven and earth are heartless and mean that heaven treats all living things equally and has no bias. But many people take it literally and think that all living things in the world are just like pigs and dogs in the eyes of heaven and earth. This is a shallow understanding. As for the supreme oblivion, Taoists and swordsmen practice heavenly heart technique and slowly abandon all emotions. In the end, they abandon all emotions and turn into a demon-like existence. It's said that at the last step, all that's left is a shell that can only think but has no emotions. That's the peak of supreme oblivion that can ascend. Could it be that this oblivion only means what it says, to forget emotions? Li Yunxin frowned. I've always been puzzled about this. Supreme oblivion should mean to not be moved by emotions and not be disturbed by emotions. To forget emotions and transcend the world. It's very similar to what those practitioners of the intent realm and emptiness realm should be like. There are still human emotions in the heart, but they're trying hard to suppress them, telling themselves not to care and not to be moved. But when the realm is higher, it actually means to really forget emotions. The core principle of the supreme Taoism of Dao Tong and Kenzo is actually such a shallow sentence. Don't you think it's strange? Chapter 324. Yang Jianzi finally frowned slightly. From his previous indifferent expression, he now looked like he was pondering carefully. Fu Liangzi also moved his lips as if he really wanted to say something. But then he realized that what Li Yunxin had said just now, although it didn't seem like anything shocking to him, it could be considered a unique view. If he continued to mock Yang Jianzi now, he would feel that he was at a disadvantage. So he didn't say anything. Only Huai Juezi, who was always silent, laughed coldly and muttered something like, "How dare you say such things?" Then Yang Jianzi took a deep breath. "We were talking about the sword saint earlier. Why are you saying this to me now?" is to ask you to calm down first. Li Yunxin said seriously, then we can talk about the possibility of handing over the two people behind you to me. The two people behind you naturally referred to Fu Liangzi and Huai Juezi. When they heard Li Yunxin's words they were stunned at first but then they laughed angrily. Li Yunxin, have you also been abducted by that wandering ghost? Li Yunxin ignored them as usual and only looked at Yang Jianzi. You want to join the Freemasonry. But I don't know if you are sincere or if you have other motives. Of course I am sincere, Yang Jianzi said in a deep voice. That's not important. What's important is that when you go there you will have your own goals. Whether it's to spy on some information or to borrow power to take revenge on Daotong, you have to first grab some resources and power, then you can use them. But just now you saw their attitudes. Li Yunxin pointed at Fu Liangzi. This person was defeated by me. He has great ambition but little talent. He hid in Daotong's Langya cave for many years, and the only thing he did was to use a formation to sneak attack Kun Wuzi. In the end he didn't succeed and was killed by the two of us, even losing his body. After he was brought back to Daotong by Kun Wuzi, some other things seemed to have happened and gave him some other advantages. In the end he messed things up and now he is like this. I hid behind you and gritted my teeth saying that I was talking nonsense, but I couldn't pounce forward and fight to the death, and I didn't have the confidence to completely trust you and ask the three of you to work together to kill me. It's pathetic that you ended up like this. Fu Liangzi roared, Li Yunxin. You've gone too far. Li Yunxin smiled. This is the kind of person who dared to talk back to you and flaunt his seniority in front of you. And who are you? You created a unique sword palace in the world. I don't care why you failed, but because of what you've done in the past, I have to praise you as an ambitious and ruthless person. Then you should be able to imagine what the situation would be like if you really joined the Freemasons. There are many people like him. They are the trusted aides and tentacles of the Freemasons' elders. If you want to be a foreign official, there will always be the word, foreign. You will be constantly doubted and suppressed, and you will be surrounded by trouble. You won't have time to care about other things. Are you willing to be like this? As he listened to Li Yunxin's words, the redness on Yang Jianzi's body slowly receded, as if he was slowly regaining his composure. When Li Yunxin finished speaking, Yang Jianzi was silent for a while. Then, with a wave of his hand, a golden stream of light surrounded his body with a buzzing sound, quickly turning into a set of clothes. Then, in your opinion, Yang Jianzi sighed softly, what should I do? Yang Jianzi, don't listen to his nonsense. Fu Liangzi shouted in shock and anger. This person has always been crafty and goes back on his words. You think he is helping you and cooperating with you, but you don't know that in the end he is the one scheming against you. How can you take advantage of him? But as soon as he said this, he realized that he had said something stupid. This Yang Jianzi used to be the palace master of the Sword Palace and was a person who thought highly of himself. Now that he had heard what Fu Liangzi said, how could he really retreat obediently? Instead, Li Yunxin laughed out loud. Look, this kind of idiot even saying stupid things. You say in my opinion? In my opinion there is no one else in this world. Why don't you and I work together to capture these two fellows and interrogate them in detail? For example, we can ask them about the secrets of the Freemasonry, taboos, rules, and even which leaders' likes and dislikes and which elder's favorite thing. If you know all these things, won't you be like a fish in water if you really join the Freemasonry in the future? I can also ask some of the things I want to know. Then both of us will benefit. It's a win-win situation. Yang Jianzi slowly tilted his head and glanced at Fu Liangzi. Then he smiled coldly. Oh, it sounds like a good idea. But the problem is, what happens after we ask them? Then we kill them, Li Yunxin said. You push the blame to me, it has nothing to do with you. At this time Fu Liangzi stopped shouting. He looked at Yang Jianzi and then at Li Yunxin. He reached out to pull Huai Juzi and said in a low voice, let's go. But he pulled empty air. He immediately turned to look. At this time he heard Yang Jianzi say, you are only in the true realm. Do you have the confidence to capture two spiritual masters if you work with me and have the means to kill them? You have to know. Spiritual masters are said to be undying. Fu Liangzi turned and saw Huai Juzi. He had already fled one zhang away and activated the bell of chaos in his hand. This bell of chaos spun and quickly grew larger, covering Huai Juzi within. Fu Liangzi realized something and only had time to shout, you The bell of chaos had already given a loud boom and exploded into 5 or 6 balls of white mist in the sky. It had fled far away. At this time, Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and looked at the fleeing people, then at Fu Liangzi. He finally laughed. Look. Didn't one already escape and only one is left? Fu Liangzi looked left and right as if he was looking for a way out. But he quickly realized that the way was not easy to find. His talisman had already been destroyed by Yang Jianzi. And looking at how that person had destroyed his talisman, his cultivation level was definitely higher than his. And there was also the goddamn Li Yunxin. He could only grit his teeth and focus. Fellow Taoist Yang Jianzi, you have to think carefully before you act. Fellow Taoist Huai Juzi has already fled far away. What happened here? He can't leave, Li Yunxin said lazily. At the same time he glanced at Yang Jianzi. Am I right? The two people's gazes focused on this sword palace master. The latter was silent for a while and finally smiled. He can't leave. This is the Yu Nation. And I've operated outside of Rong City for 5 years. If I can't keep one spiritual master here, I might as well break my sword. After saying this, he turned to look at Li Yunxin. But an hour ago I was still an enemy of the Dragon King. At this time, how could the Dragon King know that I can ally with the Dragon King? The Dragon King is too daring and does things too unexpectedly. Chapter 325. Li Yunxin smiled enigmatically. I have always been a good judge of people. Maybe if it was another time, another place and a few people, Palace Master would not have made such a decision. But at this time, Palace Master revealed his true nature when he heard Sword Saint, so I know that Palace Master has a very important goal. For this goal you can do anything. And I am also a person like that. Yang Jianzi thought for a moment and nodded slightly. Then he casually turned around, waved his hand and pointed in the direction that Huai Juzi had gone. Hit! A golden light shot out of his fingertip and quickly retracted. When it shot out dozens of zhang, the golden light had already gathered into a green flying sword. It gave off an earth-shattering sound in the air, dragging a long white trail as it chased after Huai Juzi, who had already disappeared. Then this Yang Jianzi turned to look at Fu Liangzi. This is a Kenzo technique. It is called immeasurable light. You call yourselves dual cultivators of the sword path, and previously suspected that I was cultivating an unorthodox technique. Are you proficient in this technique? At this time Fu Liangzi realized that this person remembered everything he had said. Although he did not seem to care on the surface, he forced himself to stay alert. While guarding against Li Yunxin and looking for an opportunity to escape, he said, I've heard of it. It is said that it is the most profound technique of the true realm sword cultivators. But it is unknown how much of the power of this technique you, a demon cultivator, can use. Huai Juzi's Bell of Chaos is one of the ultimate treasures of Langya Grotto Heaven, I think. At this point he was suddenly interrupted by a loud sound. Yang Jianzi's flying sword that had shot out like lightning and disappeared from sight seemed to have activated some formation. At a place extremely far away, rays of golden light suddenly shot out of the sky and weaved into an enormous golden net in the air. Then a green chrysanthemum made of smoke and air currents bloomed in the net. Then when the smoke and golden light slowly dissipated, the three of them finally heard a roaring sound that shook their eardrums and numbed their bones. From the looks of it, it is indeed a treasure. Yang Jianzi stared expressionlessly at Fu Liangzi amidst the loud noise. In order to destroy that thing and kill that fleshly body, you actually activated my Wuxia metal sword formation. I have spent more than 4 years setting up this formation. Fu Liangzi's face turned pale and he blinked his eyes subconsciously. Do you think you're very powerful now? Right now, you're helping that Li Yunxin. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Since Li Yunxin has appeared nearby, and now I know that the unfettered one is by your side. He definitely has an ulterior motive. As Fu Liangzi spoke, he stared at the two vigilantly. At the same time he threw out talisman after talisman, causing a dense array formation to surround himself. However, Li Yunxin and Yang Jianzi did not stop him. Instead they were like two cats that had caught a mouse, watching him struggle on his deathbed. Since he has ulterior motives for Qingdu, according to his usual style, he will first find out your background. Now with just a few words he has persuaded you to join forces with him. He has the ability to do so. Don't you think? Why did he do this? It's to see your reaction and actions. He can take me down and he can also find out your temperament and habits. When Fu Liangzi said this, his face was no longer as pale as before. It was unknown whether the layers of spells and restrictions around him gave him confidence, or if he felt that he had sorted out his thoughts as he spoke, or if he had some other unknown tricks up his sleeves. You actually fell for his trick and yet you're still so proud of yourself. If I were really taken down by you today and both you and him managed to get something out of me, do you think you have any chance of winning against him in the future? Fu Liangzi looked at Yang Jianzi and sneered. Right now, I'm not sighing for my life, I'm just sighing for your stupidity that has harmed me. However, when Yang Jianzi heard these words, he laughed as well. Do you think I don't know? Do you think I'm someone who can be easily convinced? He tilted his head and sighed softly. Do you think I don't have such thoughts? Since you've said these words, Dragon King, and I don't need to be secretive anymore. As he spoke, he cupped his hands towards Li Yunxin. This Fu Liangzi is so wary of Dragon King. It seems that he has indeed been subdued by Dragon King's elegance. I believe that Dragon King also wanted to see my methods just now. Now I will show it to Dragon King. At this time, Dragon King should let I see how to destroy that spiritual master's soul. As he said this, he waved his hand towards the distance. The flying sword that he had shot out earlier buzzed and flew back from the horizon. It hovered beside him and spun continuously. The light on the sword flowed endlessly as though it was imprisoning something. It should be that Huaiju Zi's soul. Therefore, not only was Fu Liangzi shocked, even Li Yunxin was shocked. The metal chain that he had obtained from Bai Yanjun was a treasure because it specialized in locking souls. In the past, when Yunzi's soul was locked and when Fu Liangzi's soul was locked, it was a miraculous achievement. But now this Yang Jianzi's flying sword could actually lock souls. But this was not what shocked him the most. Yang Jianzi himself was unfathomable. This Yang Jianzi was said to be in the true realm, spiritual master realm. Yet with one strike he destroyed Fu Liangzi's Rui talisman, and with another strike he killed spiritual master Huaiju Zi's physical body from 1,000 miles away. He displayed such terrifying power, and even used the formation that he said he had spent many years to complete. And these things, if possible, were in Li Yunxin's hands, he would be very happy to hide them and use them as trump cards to turn defeat into victory at a critical moment. This Yang Jianzi was someone who had managed and built the Sword Palace. He definitely would not be like a young brat who had just entered the martial world and did not know the gravity of the situation and take out all his wealth in one move. This seemed to mean that he had even more powerful and terrifying methods. Li Yunxin glanced at Kun Wuzi beside him, and thought of the things that Kun Wuzi had said to him in the clouds. Yang Jianzi was not an ordinary demon. Naturally, there were many extraordinary demons. Shinryu was not ordinary, the Golden Rock was not ordinary, and even the Diablo and Lord Dongting were not small demons that could be found in the wilderness. But Yang Jianzi's background was even more special, from a political point of view. It was also because of this that Li Yunxin had tried to treat him with courtesy, just now, and was able to facilitate the current situation, to temporarily stand on the same side as him. But now this Yang Jianzi's behavior was somewhat out of his expectations. This seemed to be a fellow that was not easy to control. In reality, when he heard the name Sword Saint just now, Li Yunxin could not be sure if he had really lost control, or if he was pretending for the people present to see. Chapter 326. And now Yang Jianzi wanted to see how he was going to kill a Taoist soul. Li Yunxin could do it, and he had two different methods. However, he could not display these two methods in a show of force like Yang Jianzi did. Because one of them was related to his biggest secret, and the other was related to Pitfall Mountain's biggest secret. Thus he smiled, I don't have Palace Master's ability. A Taoist soul is said to be indestructible and it can't be easily erased. I still need some formations and spiritual power. I know a little about formations and setting them up is easy, but as for spiritual power, I still need Palace Master's help. Li Yunxin said sincerely, Palace Master has already killed Huaiju Zi, and as the saying goes, there's no turning back. Looks like you have no choice but to agree to my request. The two of them talked about Fu Liangzi's life and death in front of him, but Fu Liangzi didn't run anymore. Was it because he knew he couldn't run or because he had something he could rely on? He cast layers of restrictions on himself and coldly watched Li Yunxin and Yang Jianzi talk. Now hearing Li Yunxin's words he laughed coldly. There's no turning back? Or rather there's no turning back. Then he looked at Yang Jianzi. Did I say anything wrong? Li Yunxin tricked you into joining him and asked you to help him kill Huai Juzi. Now you've already killed him but you can't do anything to his soul. You either help him set up a formation to kill the soul or wait for the matter to be exposed. But if the formation is really set up, I guess it won't just kill the soul. You think he's a gentleman, a hero, and you did what he said, but you don't know that he doesn't care about morality at all, right? Do you regret it now? Yang Jianzi didn't respond to him, but he did frown and look at Li Yunxin. What does Dragon King mean? I thought Dragon King was also a hero. Li Yunxin sighed slightly. Don't be hasty. Listen to me slowly. You think I have deceived you into going so far that there is no turning back. I do think so. But not all. It's only because of this that you can listen to me. Do you want to know what happened in Daotong? Yang Jianzi frowned again. What does Daotong's business have to do with me? The affairs of Daotong are related to the affairs of the world. Li Yunxin's expression turned serious. Yang Jianzi thought for a moment before replying, You can tell me. But today this is the last time I believe in Dragon King's words. Li Yunxin nodded. Fu Liangzi sneered, What can you say? But, Li Yunxin suddenly turned to look at him and frowned. Do you know that you're very noisy? Then he suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed upwards. Then I'll let you be quiet. By the time they soared into the sky it was already afternoon, and the sun was already leaning towards the west. They stayed in the sky facing each other and fighting for a long time. Thus at this time the sun had almost completely disappeared behind the mountains, leaving behind a fading red glow in the western sky. In the east, a bright moon had already risen round like a jade plate. Li Yunxin stretched out his hand to grab the jade plate. Some children also liked to grab the moon at night. They would raise their hands up high and the small moon in the night sky would seem to be pinched between two fingers. At this moment, Li Yunxin also stretched out two fingers. Strangely Yang Jianzi and Fu Liangzi were in different positions, but they both saw that Li Yunxin was pinching the bright moon between his fingers at the same time. Then he really plucked the moon. The curtain of night instantly receded like a tide, retreating towards the bright moon in Li Yunxin's hand. The mountains, rivers, clouds, stars, people, everything between heaven and earth seemed to have been drawn on a piece of paper, and now they were pulled back by the moon in Li Yunxin's hand. Thus, the original appearance of heaven and earth was revealed. When he threw out the misty lock-toed palace, the sun had just started to set. Now, it was still the same time. Heaven and earth was not the night sky but the sun and dusk. The night sky that he had taken away turned into a ball of fog, lingering around the moon in his palm. As for Fu Liangzi, he had actually taken it along with him and was now in the cloud of fog in his palm. As if he was frightened, he darted left and right, and emitted rays of golden light from his palm in all directions. But that ball of fog was like an endless prison. No matter how he flew he could not reach the end and could only go around in circles. Fu Liangzi finally couldn't help but curse and asked Li Yunxin to let him out. In Li Yunxin's palm he was a small person only the size of a thumb. But his voice was not soft, it was as if he was right beside him. But nobody paid attention to him. Yang Jianzi's face was still filled with surprise and he couldn't help but look around. A moment later he looked at Li Yunxin. Dragon King. It's nothing like riding a tiger and not being able to back down. Li Yunxin smiled warmly. His smile against the warm sunlight made him look like a gentle and honest person. When I saw the two of them I used this talisman, Misty Lock-Toed Palace. When they saw you they thought they had left the illusion but they were actually still in the illusion. The illusion of this treasure is both real and fake, fake and real. Palace Master probably doesn't even know that you entered the illusion. Inside this talisman a year is like a day, so from the outside only an instant has passed. Just now when you killed Huai Juzi and said those words, no one outside could hear or see it. Whether you did it or not, it's all up to you. Yang Jianzi was silent for a while and then said, This means that Dragon King could have taken me in just now. Li Yunxin smiled slightly and didn't comment. That Fu Liangzi stomped his feet in exasperation and shouted in the mist, He definitely has a bigger plan. You idiot. Yang Jinzi thought again and exhaled lightly. Dragon King, please speak. What you just said concerns the world. Li Yunxin took a deep breath and said solemnly, I'll tell you first, the saints are already dead. The scholar saint and the sword saint are probably already dead. And the saints now are puppets. Puppets of the Freemasons. Yang Jinzi heard his words and his eyes widened. Dragon King isn't joking? Li Yunxin didn't make a sound. Yang Jinzi stared at him for a while and then said, But how is that possible? The saints are dead? Who can kill them? Who can be the puppet of the saints? Many people have seen the two saints in these years. An hour ago I had the same reaction as you right now. Li Yunxin sighed slightly. But think carefully, is there anything strange about Daotong and Kenzo? Yang Jinzi stilled because of his words. So Li Yunxin said in a low voice, I have to start from when Kun Wuzi returned to Cloud Mountain. Chapter 327. After saying this, he turned to look at the remnant soul of Kun Wuzi. The remnant soul was previously sealed by him, and now it looked like it was imprisoned in amber. The golden light emitted by the incantation caused him to be unable to speak, and even his expression slowly became lax. A divine soul could not exist for a long time after leaving the body. Although there was a huge difference between a low-level cultivator and a profound realm cultivator, Kun Wuzi's divine soul had suffered a serious injury, and thus at this moment, it was like a candle in the wind. In fact, there were other paths: to let his divine soul become a ghost cultivator, to become a Yin god or a demon. However, Kun Wuzi did not choose this path, and this caused Li Yunxin to feel slightly surprised. After the surprise, there was also a hint of admiration. Because this is the divine soul of a profound realm Taoist. Li Yunxin sighed. Profound realm. When this Kun Wuzi was alive, he was still in the profound realm, the second level of the profound realm, and after 2 more levels he would be in the supreme indifference realm. Have you ever thought of cultivating to the profound realm yourself? Yang Jinzi waited for him to reveal the earth-shattering secret, but Li Yunxin changed the topic. However, this palace master of the Sword Palace did not rush to ask. Instead, he seriously considered Li Yunxin's question for a while and lightly sighed. If I cultivate according to the methods of Daotong and Kenzo, with hard work and medicine, I can cultivate to the transformation realm. However, to enter the true realm I still need talent. But to enter the profound realm, only hard work, medicine and talent are not enough. I need luck and opportunities. But luck and opportunities are too little. Now, in the past thousands of years, there are only a few dozen profound realm cultivators in Daotong and Kenzo. Cultivating to the profound realm is something I dare not think of. Yes. Following the methods of Daotong and Kenzo. Li Yunxin smiled. That is also something I dare not think of. But this person cultivated to the profound realm, and held the high position of the sect master of Daotong Paradise. But now he has become like this. I met him for the first time in the city of Wei. I had just killed Yunzi then. The second time I met him was in Dongting. At that time he took the Taoists of Langya Cave of Heaven to get the dragon soul. Li Yunxin spoke a little slower, as if he was thinking and speaking at the same time. When I set up Ling Kongzi and Yunzi, I thought Daotong underestimated the enemy, so I sent 2 or 3 kittens. Later on, when this sect master came, I felt that there was finally a big shot. He and his disciples burned down the city of Wei to make a Dharma array and take the dragon's soul. Big money, big fanfare. That was what I thought at the time. But now that I look back, it shouldn't have been like this. Li Yunxin frowned. What is this thing? What is its weight? Even if a sage came to Dongting to take it in person, I don't think it is a big deal. It is the soul of Shinryu, and Shinryu is the lord of the demons in the world, a super force of the Grand Supreme Realm. He paused and looked up at Yang Jinzi, but it was a sect master of a cave of heaven, with a group of disciples. Just 180% of the total power of Daotong and Kenzo. Don't you think it is like sending people to die? Yang Jinzi was silent for a while, but after all, it is a profound realm in several realms. Together, it is a rare powerful force in the world. It can destroy a country. Those Taoists probably thought so they came. They are too confident in themselves. After all, Daotong and Kenzo are the absolute forces in the world. Li Yunxin looked at him, under the premise that the inside has not been eaten empty. Then think about a few months ago. The emperor of the Li Kingdom became a ghost emperor. Super powerful. So powerful that the Daotong and Kenzo sent several profound realm and true realm cultivators, but in the end most of them were killed. For so many years, for thousands of years nothing happened, but at this time a ghost emperor appeared. And at this time he wanted to take the dragon soul and start a war with the demons. You say this is a coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences. If you ask me, someone is deliberately and slowly weakening the power of Daotong and Kenzo. They are starting to act now. Yang Jianzi frowned. Li Yunxin realized that he looked a little anxious, but he didn't know why. But what does it have to do with me? Li Yunxin smiled. Is it? You built a sword palace in a secular country with the body of a demon, and let demons and mortals live together. You even taught them the Heaven's Heart technique. Which one of it is not enough for the people of Daotong and Kenzo to come out in full force and kill you? But in these 1,000 years, did anyone cause trouble for you? Yang Jianzi's expression became strange. It was as if he wanted to laugh carelessly, but at the same time he was trying hard to suppress this emotion, as if he was enduring something in a low-key manner. Then he shook his head. The matter of my sword palace is slightly more complicated. You don't know the inside story. Li Yunxin smiled slightly. How complicated? Is it more complicated than when you were a sword saint and that flying sword turned into a demon? Thus, Yang Jianzi's expression froze on his face, as if melted metal had suddenly encountered extreme cold and froze in an instant. Then, as if he had woken up from a dream, he first looked around quickly, then widened his eyes and stared straight at Li Yunxin. How did you know about this? I only knew about it an hour ago, Li Yunxin said calmly. Kun Wuxia told me everything about you. How did he know? Yang Jianzi shook his head in surprise. How did he know? The people of that year are all dead. It's just that you think so. However, there were always some people who managed to survive. For example, this Kun Wuxia. Li Yunxin turned his head and looked at Kun Wuxia's divine soul for a while, then sighed softly. I just didn't expect that he could escape the great calamity that year, but couldn't escape the calamity today. You can't be blamed for what happened that year. After he said this, Yang Jianzi became silent. After a long time he suddenly raised his head and stared at Li Yunxin strangely. Then the surprised expression on his face slowly faded, replaced by a faint and complicated smile. So you didn't know at all. Just now you laid out so much and pulled so many strings, just to prepare for the sentence. You were a sword saint and that flying sword turned into a demon? In the end, I actually answered. Yang Jianzi shook his head. Then which sentence of yours was true? Li Yunxin spread his hands and smiled. Actually, Kun Wuxia wasn't very clear. He only said that you were a sword servant of the sword saint. He knew that Daotong was no longer a place to stay, so he came to join you. I guess that you had a close relationship with the sword saint. But he also mentioned a great calamity. But you know, he is now delirious and crazy, so I didn't ask him about it. So, I gave myself away when I said there was a great calamity? This time Yang Jianzi was silent for a long time. Then he raised his head as if he had made a decision. Kun Wuxia couldn't have experienced that calamity. That calamity happened 1,000 years ago. Using all the power in the world to surround and kill the art saint. Chapter 328. You call him the painting saint? Not the painting demon? Li Yunxin's face suddenly tightened. This meant that he was very concerned about this matter. But from Yang Jianzi's point of view, his concern seemed to have surpassed the matter itself. Although they had only crossed swords for a few hours, Yang Jianzi already had a vague understanding of Li Yunxin's character. He rarely seemed to care about anything, especially in front of him when it involved such a big matter that concerned the interests of both parties. He should have been more relaxed, like how he used that tone to ask Yang Jianzi to help him deal with the two Freemasons. But now, after hearing about this matter, he did not hide his emotions at all. The master of the sword palace remembered this minute detail in his heart. Then he smiled. The painting demon, the painting demon. This saying hasn't been passed down for a long time, only a few decades. 1,000 years ago there were 3 saints in the world. Before and after the siege of the painting saint, Daotong and Kenzo didn't allow the name of the painting saint to be mentioned. They only said that the saint was possessed by the devil. It's a pity. The calligraphy saint has Daotong and the sword saint has Kenzo. The painting saint has his own school of painting. but it can't compare to Daotong and Kenzo. Yang Jianzi said as he observed Li Yunxin's expression. This was the first time he saw such a vivid expression on his face. It was as if he was an audience in a tea house, being pulled and tugged at by every word of the storyteller on stage. He listened attentively to every word and sentence that Yang Jianzi uttered, and then absorbed them all into his heart. This Li Yunxin seemed to care a lot about things related to the painting saint, especially the painting saint himself. Yang Jianzi knew that Li Yunxin cultivated the art of painting. Unfettered One from the Freemasons had revealed this to him. But he didn't know if this was the reason why Li Yunxin seemed to care so much. Logically speaking, there were people from Munanju in the city. He paused and thought about it for a moment before continuing. It is said that the art saint was a man of leisure and did not like to interact with people. Moreover, the Daotong Kenzo has been passed down for tens of thousands of years, and has been operating for a long time. That's why that painting school is on par with the other two in name, but in reality, it's only the size of one of the caves in Daotong or Kenzo. At that time, Daotong and Kenzo had the two sages, profound realm and true realm cultivators, and countless disciples. As for the school of painting, apart from the painting saint, there are only two true realm Taoist painting priests. The rest are just some low-level cultivators. But at that time, the two sages announced that the art saint was possessed by the devil and wanted to get rid of him. There were many people in the art school who were willing to die for the art saint. Apart from a few informants planted by Daotong and Kenzo, the remaining Taoist painters actually planned to become enemies with the righteous path of the world. I can't blame them. If I were a person, I would probably be convinced by a character like the art saint. Unfortunately, the art saint, I've also heard of it, dismissed them. He went to fight alone. Naturally, those who were dismissed would not be at ease. The Daotong Taoist painters and Kenzo swordsmen still had to get rid of them. But in the end, there were still fish that escaped the net. Those fish that escaped the net, in the words of the righteous path of the world, are the remnants of the painting devil. There are some of them in Qingdu. You should have met them before. Munanju. Yang Jianzi paused again and looked at Li Yunxin. Therefore, what I don't understand is, why didn't the Dragon King ask Munanju about these things, but instead listen to me? I don't really like to have dealings with them. Li Yunxin frowned slightly. It's a personal reason. I've already guessed what you said, and now that I see it, I've more or less guessed it. But the important thing is, why did you say that the art saint was possessed by the devil? You also said that Kun Wuzi wasn't there during the great calamity 1,000 years ago. Then were you there? Did you see the art saint? Did you see him die with your own eyes? I was there. A smile suddenly appeared on Yang Jianzi's face. But the Dragon King wants to know what happened 1,000 years ago, and I want to know what happened in Daotong and Kenzo. These two things are probably a long story. Does the Dragon King intend to stay in the sky and tell us here? Then where do you want to go? Yang Jianzi thought for a moment, then pointed to the west. Why don't we go to my Hongling? Li Yunxin only hesitated for a breath's time. Then he nodded. All right. Yang Jianzi was slightly stunned. He carefully looked at Li Yunxin again. He invited Li Yunxin into his tiger's den, and Li Yunxin actually agreed just like that. He himself was a person with a mild temperament and was calm in the face of change. But now that he saw Li Yunxin's expression, he really couldn't understand it for a moment. Was the art saint's matter really that important to him? Thus, he pondered for a moment and asked in confusion, Isn't the Dragon King worried that my Hongling is a trap? Li Yunxin laughed. What's there to worry about? Just now, you also said that you operated in Hongling for many years, and even used the formation you operated to kill Huaijuzi. As long as there's nothing wrong with their brains, they should know that your place is a tiger's den. Then why would the Dragon King put himself in danger? Yang Jianzi was even more confused. Just for the art saint? Li Yunxin smiled. Personal reasons. This was the second time in a short period of time that Li Yunxin emphasized personal reasons. Yang Jianzi didn't really understand this concept, but he felt that he could roughly understand it. Because he felt that he could understand it, he stilled and laughed. There are many rumors about the Dragon King. But looking at the rumors now, I didn't expect the Dragon King to be such a romantic person. Li Yunxin stilled and frowned. What the hell was romantic? He knew that the romantic of this era was not the romantic of his world. But even so, what he did just now was not even close to being flirtatious. He stilled while Yang Jinzi couldn't help but sigh. Yes. No wonder the Dragon King is like this. Weren't all the disciples of the art saint like this? I was fortunate enough to see the back of the art saint during the calamity. Oh really? Li Yunxin mentioned personal reasons twice, and this was the second time Yang Jinzi sighed about the art saint. Yet this sigh, Li Yunxin realized that something was wrong. He frowned and looked at Yang Jinzi. You said before that if you were a person you would also admire the art saint. What do you mean? Yang Jinzi looked at him strangely. Could it be that the Dragon King? Then he paused and blinked. Ah, so the Dragon King doesn't know? Know what? Yang Jinzi laughed loudly, his voice traveling far in the wind. The art saint was publicly recognized as the most beautiful person in the world. That you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.